stone, a log into it, and stuff grows. It's that first.
Yeah, we're off. Hi, guys.
You can now get the same drone used by the military, but for a fraction of the price. This is an extremely high-tech 7,500 Australian dollar drone. It was developed so that military observation teams could do recon missions, view enemy positions.
Oh, where'd it go? Hang on. Hang on, guys. I thought I loaded it. Hang on, guys. There it is. Oh, there it is there. Got it. Okay.
It's still going to get into a TV. We're going to be looking at some different documents tonight, including the Dead Sea Scrolls. We'll be looking at the Qumran, and although I know it is called the Qumran Bible, as I've said before, I don't like to use that terminology.
It's just too bad.
Because to me, it's not the Bible. It is the document of the Qumran, and it does have some very interesting historical documentation about Planet X. I need to get into that because in the Dead Sea Scrolls, you're going to find out their interpretation of some of the passages in the Bible.
I'm streaming.
Clearly indicate
they can hear what you're saying.
The passing of Planet X. And I ran across that as I was preparing tonight, which definitely took me down a different direction. Makes me think of Malachi 3 as well, the earth burning like a fire and the judgment of God, etc. going on. Revelation chapter 9, the star, of course, falling from heaven there, which we know is actually some kind of person because it refers to him in a personal pronoun. And then, of course, you get here on BNO News, meteorite explodes over Israel in the West Bank. Now, I know this has nothing to do with that star coming down, but I just thought it was kind of fitting that here I am preparing the message for today, and I get the meteorite explosion.
Hi, Diane. Hi, boss. Sorry, guys.
I'm having trouble. Boom in the country there. There's a picture of it there. I did have a video. I am sure. Let me just see on Twitter here. I'm sure that they're showing some different things there. Let me just pop up the word meteorite here. A meteor is the way I did it earlier.
Hi, Tricky. Good to see you, mate.
I think I did a video, and there was a video of it, but it's kind of hard to catch these things here. Let me just try Meteor Israel. I think that's the way I did it earlier. There was one video footage of this thing coming in. Here it is right here, this one here. So let it play again. There it goes. And it burst across the skies of Israel there. So I just thought it was kind of interesting, like I said, that it just so happens to happen as I'm preparing this particular footage. So pretty neat there. And I'll just retweet that for those of you that follow us here on Twitter. And by the way, if you don't know about following us on Twitter, here we are right there, Israeli News Live at Stephen Denoon, Denoon. And also just remind you, though, just before we get started here, those of you that want to support the broadcast, your help is greatly appreciated. So IsraeliNewsLive.org. Our address is always at the top of the screen, right above my head there, Stephen Ben-Nun, and that's Bennun, P.O. Box 156, Sunbright, Tennessee 37872. Of course, you can always donate online. It's a little faster if that's the way you feel in your heart, but we really appreciate it, and believe me, it is your kindness that makes all these things possible. Somebody had wrote in the comments, before I ended up having to turn the comments off on this other video that I did on Israeli News Live. And really and truly, I'm probably going to end up taking it down because I just wasn't ready. And I just did a terrible, terrible job on that video there. The real purpose I was wanting to be able to show, it wasn't about who's first or what, nothing to do with that. It's just showing how the corroboration or the Mike just really seems to corroborate the information that I've been sharing for quite some time on our Patreon channel. But I did do the video on Patreon today that I said I was going to do. Who opened the door for the devil? And on this one, I had everything laid out. It was really ready, very well prepared. I think it'll be a blessing for many of you that want to watch that there. So in the description, as usual, the link to Patreon / Israel or / Israeli News Live. That's how you find it. I think you'll really enjoy that. But it's because of this information that I'm really doing a lot of biblical searches there. And like I said, when I had the other video opened on comments there, I'd gotten one comment about the sixth seal. So maybe we'll touch into that a little bit as well. Let's look at this first, Revelation chapter 9, and then we're going to look at some very shocking information here, especially the Dead Sea Scrolls. That one has blown me away. And the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. To him. It's a star falling, but he gets the key. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit as the smoke of a great furnace. And the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit.
Tricky, that's why I'm actually playing it, because if the Dead Sea Scrolls talk about Planet X, it's probably true.
It's one reason why I want to bring up the Kolbrin, because when it talks about the way Planet X passes, and we're going to look at the past as well as the future one, that really makes you do some scratching your head. It says that, and there came out of the smoke locust upon the earth, and unto them was given power, and the scorpions of the earth, as the scorpions of the earth have power. Now, why did the idea of the locust? You have to understand the passing of this binary system definitely comes with locusts, even as we'll see in the, I don't think I actually have that part of the Kolbrin pulled up when it talks about when this system passed during the times of Moses in the Exodus. They actually claim that it happened during that time. I do believe that Malachi is actually referring to that, to during that time of events as well. So there is a good possibility that that was the loop of the planet. So just a thought, keep these things in mind. And believe me, you're going to need an open mind on what we're talking about tonight, really and truly. It was commanded to them they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. And to them it was given that they should not kill them, but that they should be tormented 5 months. And their torment was as the torment of the scorpion when he striketh a man. In those days shall men seek death and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. And the shapes of the locusts were likened to horses prepared unto battle. And on their heads were, as it were, crowns like gold, and their faces were as the faces of men. The locust the size of a horse, face of a man. This is not just some little bug. But even if we are looking at locusts, you know, if we look at the melting of the permafrost, one of the things that Mike mentioned up there near Russia, that, you know, watch for locusts up there. Now, I know there's been a lot of talk about that. Even we've actually brought that out as well. The locusts will be coming this year, but that's actually a thing that happens every so many years anywhere on the earth. So it's nothing unusual, but he's talking about it from the melting permafrost. Maybe so. I really don't know the answer to that at all. But if you go on down though and get into the sixth seal, saying to the sixth angel which had the trumpet, loose the 4 angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And the 4 angels were loose, which were prepared for an hour, a day, and a month, and a year, for to slay a third part of men. Now that's the important part. And the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000. And I heard the number of them, and thus I saw the horses in the vision. Them that sat on them having breastplates of fire, and jacinth and brimstone, and heads of horses were as the heads of lions, and out of their mouths issued fire and smoke and brimstone. By these 3 was the third part of men killed, by the fire, by the smoke, and by the brimstone which issued out of their mouths. For their power is in their mouth and their tails, for their tails were likened to serpents, and had heads, and with them they do hurt. Now, you keep in mind, John, you know, going back all these years ago, 2,000 years ago, him trying to describe what he sees in these visions. Could this be possibly the passing of what we call Planet X, Nibiru, 9th planet is what the government will call it? Very good question. Very good question. And whether or not knowing the right answer to this, well, we'll just have to wait and see. Now, as I said to you, if we look at the Kolbrin here, and I just pop it up on the screen, I do have highlighted portions that I wanted to share with you. One of the things it talks about is the destroyer. But I want to bring up for you, though, let's see here. Now, this is the Dead Sea Scrolls. Let me pop past the Dead Sea Scrolls first. I want to get into the Kolbrin first, and then we're going to come back to the Dead Sea Scrolls as well.
Yeah, right.
All right, this here is the, this is, I believe, and I'm only going to be reading just a little portion of this for you of when it passed in previous times. And I think this is referring to the time, I don't know if it's during the time, this one is actually the time during the flood, or if it was the time during the Exodus. I don't recall for sure, but let me just read to you what it says here. There were some who struggled harder and were more disciplined because their forefathers had crossed the great dark void. Now, I think that is implying to the antediluvian destruction, the flood. Their desires were turned Godward, and they were called the children of God. Their country was inundated and forested. It was fertile, having many rivers and marshes, and there were great mountains to the east and to the west and north, and was vast stony plain. Then came the day when all things became still and apprehensive, for God caused a sign to appear in the heavens, so that men should know the earth would be afflicted. And the sign was a strange star. Now, by the way, when it says strange star, when I look at Revelation 9, and a star fell from heaven, and him that had it had a key, I don't know. Let's think of it, just a thought, right? There's a strange star. The star grew and waxed to a great brightness and was awesome to behold. So it takes time. This thing's coming in. It's not just there in the same day. It put forth horns and sang, being unlike any other ever seen. Remember the images of Nibiru, the winged planet? That would be like the horns that they would talk about. So men seeing it said among themselves, surely this is God appearing in the heavens above us. The star was not God, though it was directed by his design, but the people had not the wisdom to understand. I highlighted that in green because if you notice, it's directed by his design. In other words, it'll bring about the judgment that has been prophesied, but it's not the true Father. Then God manifested himself in the heavens. His voice was as the roll of thunders, and he was clothed with smoke and fire. He carried lightnings in his hand, and his breath falling upon the earth brought forth brimstone and embers. His eye was black void, with his mouth an abyss containing the winds of destruction. He encircled the whole of heavens, bearing upon his back a black robe adorned with stars. Now, when it says there, then God manifests himself in the heavens, I still don't think it's talking about the true Father. I think in this case here, because they thought it was God, that now the narrator of this book is writing it in their way of thinking. Could be wrong, but I believe that's correct. Such was the likeness and manifestation of God in those days. Awesome was his countenance, terrible his voice of wrath. The sun and the moon hid themselves in fear. There was a heavy darkness over the face of the earth.
Yeah,
God passed through the spaces of heavens above with a mighty roar and a loud trumpeting. Then came the grim dead silence and the black red lit twilight of doom. Great fires and smoke rose up from the ground, and men gasped for air. The land was rent asunder and swept clean by a mighty deluge of waters. And hole opened up in the middle of the land, and the waters entered in and sank beneath the seas. This is crazy, right? I mean, absolutely wild. This is another portion of it. I want to read this part too. The mountains of the east and the west were split apart and stood up in the midst of the waters, which raged about, and the north land tilted and turned over on its side. Then again, the tumult and clamor ceased, and all was silent in the quiet stillness. Madness broke out among men, frenzy and shouting filled in the air. They fell upon one another in senseless, wanton bloodshed. Neither did they spare woman or a child, for they knew not what they did. Notice that they didn't even realize what they were doing. They ran unseen, dashing themselves to destruction. They fled to caves and were buried and taken refuge in trees. They were hung. There was rape, murder, and violence of every kind. The deluge of waters swept back, and the land was purged clean. Rain beat down unceasingly, and there were great winds surging. Waters overwhelmed the land, and man and his flocks and his garden and all his works ceased to exist. Some of the people were saved upon the mountainsides and upon the flotsam, but they
Hey, Bobby,
were
good to see
scattered
you,
far
mate.
apart over the face of the earth. They fought for survival in the lands of uncouth people, and amid coldness they survived in caves and sheltered places. You know, one of the things that I was being told early on is that this uptick in violence, this demonic entities and their ability, because of the opening of these dimensions and things of that nature, they're allowing demons in like never before. One of the things that I shared on Patreon some time back is how that the government was seeing a rise in violent crimes and things like that, especially out west. And of course, I think I did that in the fracking video there. What CIA learned from fracking, they believed that water on the inner earth was a barrier from those spirits that are trapped inside the earth, but it was loosing them. Whether or not that's true or not, I don't know. I have no clue. Now, in this particular portion here, this is where it's going to be speaking about, I believe this is the future coming of this system once again. And this is where I want you to kind of pay close attention, and then we're going to get into the Dead Sea Scrolls, and we're going to be going into other biblical passages as well concerning this. This is chapter 3 called The Destroyer, part 1. Men forget the days of the destroyer. Only wise know where it went. And then it will return in its appointed hour.
Wow.
It raged across the heaven in the days of wrath, and this was its likeness. There's a billowing cloud of smoke, enwrapped in a ruddy glow, indistinguishable in joint or limb. Its mouth was an abyss from which came flame, smoke, and hot cinders. When age pass, certain laws operate upon the stars in the heavens. Their ways change. There is movement and restlessness. They are no longer constant, and great light appears readily in the skies. You know, last year, I was told that the system would be entering our solar system by September. As far as I know, that actually did take place. The system has already moved in. Now, again, that takes maybe a year or two to get across. And they were saying that what they're watching for is the different planets and stuff, and how they'll be nudged and moved around as a result of that. And believe it or not, intelligence tends to use ancient documents to try to get a feel for what they're anticipating that is coming. Goes on to say, when blood drops upon the earth, the destroyer will appear, and mountains will open up and belch forth fire and ashes. Trees will be destroyed, and living things engulfed, and waters will be swallowed up by the land, and seas will boil. The heavens will burn brightly and redly. There will be a copper hue over the face of the land, followed by a day of darkness. A new moon will appear and break up and fall. The people will scatter in madness. They will hear the trumpet and battle cry of the destroyer, and will seek refuge within dens in the earth. Terror will eat away their hearts, and their courage will flow from them like water from a broken pitcher. They'll be eaten up in the flames of wrath and consumed by the breath of the destroyer. Now, what's really interesting is what's going to be written here in the next two lines here. Thus it was in the days of the heavenly wrath which have gone, and thus it will be in the days of doom when it comes again. The times of its coming going are known unto the wise. These are the signs and times which shall precede the destroyer's return. 110 generations shall pass into the west, and nations will rise and fall. Men will fly in the air as birds, and swim in the seas as fishes. Men will talk peace one with another. Hypocrisy and deceit shall have their day. And women will be as men, and men as women.
Wow, that's now.
Passion will be a plaything of man. A nation of soothsayers shall rise and fall. Their tongue shall be the speech learned, and a nation of lawgivers shall rule the earth. We are definitely living in a day where men fly in the air like birds and swim in the seas like fish. They didn't have that. And I forget exactly how far back the oldest copy of this book goes. I think it's several hundred years at least. Supposedly it goes back during the times of Christ, but I do not have any clue if that's true or not. It is an old book. I do know that. It is a book that, as far as the age of it, I believe predates anything that we would have for modern technology. So again, like I said, it's more of a historical document than anything. That's the way I take it. All right, we're going to come back here. Let me first go back, see where we're at over here. We're going to be looking at the Dead Sea Scrolls, and this is where we're at over here. I didn't actually pull up the very one that we're at here, but the Dead Sea Scrolls, where you can search it online, it's got both the Hebrew and the English in there for you to be able to look at that if you ever decide you want to do so. But the one we're going to be looking at is going to be referring to the scriptures here of Isaiah chapter 10. And when you look at this from the Dead Sea Scrolls, when I say the Dead Sea Scrolls, because the Qumranite community there is going to give you the interpretation of this scripture. I'm going to first read it right here from the Bible, and then we're going to go look at the way it's written in the Dead Sea Scrolls and their interpretation of certain passages. So let's begin. Isaiah chapter 10, starting with verse 16. Therefore will the Lord of hosts, send among his fat ones leanness, and under his glory there shall be kindled a burning light, burning of fire. And the light of Israel shall be for fire, and his Holy One for a flame. It shall burn and devour his thorns and his briars in one day. The glory of his forest and his fruitful field he will consume both soul and body, and it shall be as when a sick man wasteth away. The remnant of the trees of his forest shall be few. The child may write them down. It shall come to pass in that day that the remnant of Israel and they that are escaped of the house of Jacob shall no more again stay upon him that smote them, but shall stay upon the Lord, the Holy One of Israel, in truth. A remnant shall return, even the remnant of Jacob, unto God the Mighty. El Gibor. For though thy people, O Israel, be as the sand of the sea, only a remnant of them shall return. An extermination is determined, overflowing with righteousness. By the way, verse 21, when a remnant shall return, even the remnant of Jacob, unto God the Mighty, I find that very interesting right there. Yashuv Sha'ah Yaakov El Gibor. You know what Jesus is referred to in Isaiah chapter 9? He is referred to as El Gibor. Besides the Prince of Peace, he is the El Gibor, the mighty God. Will it be that at the time of the passing of this planet, this demonic influence that many of the ancestors of those that once believed that Jesus was the Messiah will return to him. Think about it. For though thy people, O Israel, be as the sand of the sea, only a remnant of them shall return. And extermination is determined, overflowing with righteousness.
Mm-hmm.
Pay attention to that one right there. An extermination is determined.
Wow.
For an extermination wholly determined shall the Lord, the God of hosts, make in the midst of the earth. Therefore, thus saith the Lord, the God of hosts, O my people that dwellest in Zion, be not afraid of Ashur. Though he smite thee with the rod and lift up his staff against you, after the manner of Egypt. You know, Ashur is modern Syria and Iran, Iraq, all them. He's telling Zion, he's telling Israel, don't be afraid of them. And he's letting you know this is going to happen at a time when they're going to smite you with a rod. For yet a very little while, and the indignation shall be accomplished, and mine anger shall be to their destruction. Wow. Okay, before I go to the Dead Sea Scrolls, I'm going to take you to Malachi. Now, if you're reading in the King James, you're going to go to Malachi chapter 4, verse 1, right through verse 5 or 6, something to that effect. In the Tanakh, it's in the chapter 3. There is no chapter 4, and it begins in verse 19. For behold, the day cometh, it burneth as a furnace, and all the proud and all the work wickedness shall be stubble. And the day that cometh shall set them ablaze, saith the Lord of hosts, and it shall leave them neither root nor branch. But unto you that fear my name shall the Son of Righteousness arise with healing in its wings. And you shall go forth and gambol as calves of the stall. I thought that was interesting. The Shemesh Tzadikah Umrofe Bekanafiyah. I normally think of Jesus when I think of this. But you know, they also say about Planet X, it's a failed star. It's a dwarf star. They call it, in other words, like another sun, but it's kind of lost its spark. And again, it's called the winged planet.
Blue Kachina.
I don't know what to think about that, but I will show you something, though, that did catch my attention. And you shall tread down the wicked, for they shall be ashes under the soles of your feet. In the day that I do make, saith the Lord of hosts. Remember ye the law of Moses, my servant, which I commanded unto him in Horeb for all Israel, even statutes and ordinances. We're going to come back to that after we do the Dead Sea Scrolls, that one right there. I always wondered, why did God, and all of his wisdom, decide to remind you about Moses when we're reading about destruction and ashes and burning of the planet and everything else and all this judgment? Why does he talk about Horeb for all Israel, even the statutes and the ordinances, right? I think there's a reason for that. We're going to see it when we go to Deuteronomy and read it. He says, behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and terrible day of the Lord. Now, don't forget, as I've said to you on many of the videos I did on the two witnesses, Jesus puts the coming of Elijah in the future when John the Baptist is already dead. When they come to him, they said, doesn't the scripture say that Elias must first come? And Jesus says, truly, Elias will come and restore all things. He says, but I said to you, he's come already. And they did to him what was listed. Now he's talking about John the Baptist. But while John the Baptist is dead, he's saying that he will come and restore all things. And that's supposed to happen, what? Before this terrible day.
Wow.
And you shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children, the heart of the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite the land with an utter destruction. A chorim. Now, Jesus only applied to John, turning the heart of the fathers to their children. He never applied the turning of the heart of the children to their fathers. Never did. So hold that in your mind. Let's go to the Dead Sea Scrolls now. And again, remember, the Dead Sea Scrolls is going to mirror Isaiah chapter 10, where we were just reading. And I want you to see with the Qumranite community how they spoke of this. So let's blow it up so you guys can see it. I'm going to start above in the fragment above here. Like fuel for the fire, no one forgives his brother. He destroys to the right and remains hungry, and he consumes to the left and is not satiated. A man eats the flesh of his arm. Manasseh against Ephraim, Ephraim against Manasseh, the two together against Judah, and with all this, his wrath is not mollified. A quote from Isaiah 10, verse 19. Will be, and a young man will count them. And you got a blank spot. Let's ease, we're going to ease back and forth. Let's go to verse 19. And the remnant of the trees of his forest shall be a few, that a child may write them down. That's where he's quoting from. What does he say about it? He said the interpretation of the word concerns the edict of Babylon, the edict of the peoples, to betray many, he, Israel. And what it says, goes back to chapter 10, verse 19, the remainder of trees of the wood will be a small number, and a young man will count them. Its interpretation concerns the reduction of men. I'd love to know the blank spot on the rest of that, right? Then they quote Isaiah 10, verse 22. On that day it will happen that the remainder of the house of Israel and the survivors of the house of Jacob will cease to lean on their assailant, but will lean loyally on Yahweh, the Holy One of Israel. A remnant will return, a remnant of Jacob, to the God, the warrior. Even if your people Israel were like the sand of the sea, only a remnant will return. Now, we look at that as being, most of us, we always kind of look at that as being, you know, the Jewish people returning back to the land in modern days. Watch what he says here. The interpretation of the word concerns the final days. They will go into captivity, and what it says in Isaiah 10:21, even if your people Israel were like the sand of the sea, only a remnant will return. Its interpretation concerns the reduction. Since it is written in Isaiah 22 and 23, extermination is decreed, but justice will overflow, because destruction is decreed. The Lord Yahweh of hosts will execute it in the midst of the whole earth. Therefore, the Lord Yahweh of hosts, do not fear my people who live in Zion. They're talking about an event that's going to wipe out mankind, both Jew and Gentile alike. That only a remnant will be left over. Look at what else it continues to say here. This is in fragment 4Q 163. The interpretation of the world concerns the kings of Babylon, since as it is written in Isaiah 14:8, the very cypresses laugh at you, and the cedars of Lebanon, since you lie down, the hewer does not come up against them. The cypress and the cedars of Lebanon are, and what it says in Isaiah 14:26-27, this is the strategy decided for all the earth, and this is the hand stretched out against all the peoples, for Yahweh of hosts has decided who will thwart him. His hand is stretched out. Who will push it aside? This is, as it is written in the book of Zechariah 3:9. See, I will engrave its inscription of oracle of Yahweh of hosts. Going to Isaiah 14:28-30, in the year of the death of King Ahaz, this oracle was uttered. Do not rejoice, all Philistia, that the rod which injured you is shattered, because from the root of the snake shall come a viper, and its fruit will be a flying asp. The most destitute will be fed, and the poor will lie down in safety, and I will make your root die in hunger, and he will kill your remnant. A a flying asp. A draconian planet, a winged planet, a flying serpent. And isn't it interesting that as he spoke about the cedars of Lebanon, since you lie down, the hewer does not come up against them. What caused them to lie down? Well, we go back over here. See, even here, concerns of Babylon, the remainder of trees of the wood will be small number, and a young man will count them. Its interpretation concerns the reduction of men. I think it also refers to the reduction of plant life and tree life as well. That's just how destructive this force will be. And of course, we're only getting just a small fragment of what's written here in the Dead Sea Scrolls about this, but as you look at it and you begin to re-examine again, then it begins to make sense, especially in light of Malachi chapter 4, when we read about, for behold, the day cometh and burneth as a furnace, and all the proud, all that work wickedness shall be stubble, in the day that cometh shall set them ablaze, saith the Lord of hosts, and that it shall leave them neither root nor branch. As I mentioned to you, though, earlier, I said, he says, remember ye the law of my servant Moses, which I commanded him to Horeb for all Israel, even the statutes and ordinances. I don't know for sure, but it makes me wonder, as you go back and look at that, watch the way it's written here in Deuteronomy. I believe it's chapter 5 of Deuteronomy, if I'm not mistaken here. Let me just double check. Chapter 4, I apologize. Assemble me the people, and I will make them hear my words, that they may learn to fear me all the days that they live upon the earth, and that they may teach their children. And you came near and stood under the mountain, and the mountain burned with fire into the heart of heaven, with darkness, cloud, and thick darkness. And the Lord spoke unto you out of the midst of the fire, and you heard the voice of the words, but you saw no form, only a voice. And he declared unto you his covenant, which he had commanded you to perform, even the 10 words, and he wrote them upon 2 tables of stone. And the Lord commanded me at that time to teach you the statutes and ordinances, that you might do them in the land whether you go over to possess it. When that judgment passed, and according to the Colburn, it was the destroyer, the Planet X, that came through. Could we have still been going through a time where it was at that time that God comes down and meets the children of Israel, and everything is still a burning of fire and everything? I don't really know the answer to that, but I kind of can't help but wonder, because of what Malachi states. He refers us back to that time period. So I went back and looked at it, and I'm seeing all this burned with a fire and a smoke, darkness, cloud, thick darkness, etc. It makes you think. It really makes you think. In closing, let me say this here. I want to go back to 2 Corinthians, because I do want to do a separate video on this. When Paul writes to us here in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, he says, but I beseech you, that I may not be bold when I am present with that confidence wherewith I think to be bold against some, which think of us as if we walked according to the flesh. For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war after the flesh. That's important right there, friends. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations, every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. I forget exactly where it was as we were looking at the things that I've been sharing with you tonight, but one of the major things that takes place during this time of all this happening, maybe it was in the Colburn here, so I'll kind of see if I can back up and find it. And let's see. The sun and moon hid themselves. Where was it at there? And fell upon one another. Okay, yeah. Madness broke out among men, frenzy and shouting. Then again, the tumult, which is like a fighting area, and clamor ceased, and all was silent. In the quiet stillness, madness broke out among men, frenzy and shouting filled the air. They fell upon one another in senseless wanton bloodshed, and neither did they spare woman or child. We are discovering that as this system is coming in, and everything I've been hearing over the last couple of years, more and more and more, the minds of the people are just going nuts. The majority of the thoughts that come to your head are not even you. Might be your voice. You might hear it in your own voice, and you think it's you, but it's not. And this is why when Paul speaks here, for the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. You know, let me see if I can pull that up real quick, because let's see, we're in, what did I say we were in? Let me go back over here and find it in 2 Corinthians, I believe. Yeah, 2 Corinthians 10. I feel so strongly right now that people need help to prepare to know what's coming. Right, here we go, strongholds right here. Is fortified through the idea of holding safely a castle, a stronghold. I was looking to see if there were any of the words used like what we see another place where Paul speaks about, you know, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against, let me just see if I can just pull that up for you. Ephesians 6, there we go. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities. There you go, right there. The principalities are archaea. That's archons. These are fallen angels. And against powers, exousia. And as force, capacity, competency, freedom, you know, I'm just trying to say there's any particular thing I can look at there. Against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Wherefore take you on the whole armor of God. You know, these portals that are being opened, these things that are prophesied to be open, even the Euphrates and things of that nature there, they're symbolic, the words that are being used there, but in reality, these are some very demonic doorways that are being opened. And as these spirits are let loose on the earth, I can only imagine, like what we read in the Colburn there, you know, they were dealing with murders and everything else. Everything was on the increase. They didn't care if it was a woman or child or anything. What are we going to be facing? We need to truly have on the full armor of God. We need to remember, as it says in 2 Corinthians, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. Don't let these things rule your mind. First recognize, that's why Paul says, try the spirits, right? Let's see if I can find that one for you as well real quick. Try the spirits. See if they're of God. Okay? First, actually John that wrote that. Beloved, believe not every spirit, There you are right there. But try the spirits, whether they are of God, because many false prophets are going out into the world. And we're not just talking about false, or even with false prophets, because believe me, and that in itself, many false prophets are going out into the world, right? Think about that, and then think about where we read here, casting down imagination and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. If people are being bombarded for evil in this day and age, what about those religious spirits? What was that other scripture there? Satan appears as an angel of light, right? Second Corinthians, and isn't it interesting that it happens to be in 2 Corinthians 11:14, the very next chapter? Let's back up. For such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into the apostles of Christ. And no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Wow, maybe we should just jump over. Let's just jump over here into the scripture. Let's go up here and let's jump over to that chapter. We can see a little bit better there. For he that cometh preacheth another Jesus whom we have not preached, or if you receive another spirit which you have not received, or another gospel which you have not accepted, you might well bear with him. For I suppose I was not with behind the very chiefest apostles, but though I be rude in speech, yet in knowledge, but we have been thoroughly made manifest among you in all things. Let me see where that passage is as we get a little bit closer here before it's down to verse 14. All right, so let's jump back over. All right, let's start with verse 10. As the truth of Christ is in me, no man shall stop me of this boasting of the regions of Achaia. Wherefore, because I love you not, God knoweth. But what I do, that I will do. And I may cut off the occasion from them which desire occasion, that wherein they glory, they may have found even as we. For such are false apostles and deceitful workers, transforming themselves into the apostles of Christ. And no marvel, for Satan himself transformed to an angel of light. Therefore, it is no great thing if his ministers also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their works. Think about it. Think about it.
Wow, like Satan transforms himself into an angel of light. When we change, we will change significantly like that. Wow, we will change your holy body. Wow, that's pretty heavy.
That is powerful. So not just the evils and the murders and adulteries and everything else, but his ministers will be transformed as ministers of righteousness. And don't kid yourself. Many of them will lead you right in to believing this right-wing theocracy happening in Israel right now that will bring about the Noahide laws. I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live. Listen, thank you for your love, your support of this ministry. We can't do it without you, and we really greatly appreciate you supporting and giving to this ministry. Also, again, we're going to be meeting up with the people at EMP Show very soon, and I want to just remind you they have new products and stuff. And that's one of the reasons why we're going there. And I'd heard about this one here, the little mini one that they have, EMP Show for like motorcycles.
Okay, we'll do the one where he says Mike from around the world confirms many topics we covered on Patreon. So Israeli News Live again, guys.
Actually going to be on our Patreon channel. I'll be sharing with you tonight. Not the video itself that Mike does, but I have got multiple places marked in here, and I want to share with you some information, going deeper into these subjects that he talks about on here. And this is where Paul actually asked him the question about Planet X traveling in the ether. Now, Brother Paul didn't quite ask it the correct way, but that's all right. It's still close enough for me to be able to give you that information over on Patreon tonight. But then another one that I want to go on with you, and this is what we're going to talk about here on Israeli News Live tonight, is going to be, let's see, let me find you, brother. There we go. This one right here. On Paul's channel, right here, he has the video here where he's speaking there with Mike from around the world. And I have marked multiple places on here. And what I wanted to do, the reason why I'm doing this is because Mike right now is clearly being able to speak more about things than what he has in the past. But the interesting thing is that practically everything he talks about, if you were subscribed to our Patreon channel, you would already know the information. Now, granted, Mike, because he's got multiple degrees, he's very articulate, and he does have a very good way of explaining these things in depth. And just in this one video here with Paul Begley, he actually goes into things that I'm going to share with you. Actually, not so much Professor Chaim, but World War Plan for 2024. That wasn't really one of the ones either, but anyway, I'm already there. So let me just kind of go ahead and get these reloaded up here. Two CERN scientists die trying to stop an evil entity. He gets into something like that on there. I can't believe all this stuff actually had dropped off already. He's talking about the Earth heating up, the mantle, the lava. I go into that, underwater volcanoes erupting globally. We have just, you know, this one here, CIA discovers evil effects of fracking. It's not the part about fracking, but it's about something else that he speaks about that's in this video here. And basically what it is just one after another. I wanted to take you back. This is where I talk about the permafrost, what's going on there. You know, there's another place in the video where he'll talk about entities scratching, you know, underneath the ice, things like that. And I wanted you to see, because for me, you have to understand, it's not just the fact that I shouldn't say that. I'm not looking as much as, oh, wow, we were first, but it is a confirmation of the things I've been telling you. And so, you know, I want you to see some of these things here. So I wanted to go back, and I'm just going to go ahead and get everything refreshed here. Unprecedented sinkholes. I think, though, in this particular video here, it's because I talk about hypercanes. And that was another thing there. And that's not even this one. The one about the hypercanes I did a little over a year ago there. But I was talking about hypercanes 2 years ago. I couldn't find all these videos that I really wanted to. And quite frankly, I was thinking maybe you guys might even be able to help me with some of this. And I think I know why that stuff is off there. He even gets into Bigfoot. And he actually speaks about that. He doesn't say it at first, but he drops the word Bigfoot later, keepers of the earth. Now, there's two different possibilities for that. I do know that the Bigfoot is considered to be keepers of the forest. And he goes into that issue there. So I'll share with you these things. And like I said, I just thought it'd be a blessing for many of you. Let me just double check, because there's so many different things, and I don't know. Oh, this one will be another one I want to do on Patreon. This was a hunter that actually picks up a cubed craft in his video footage there while he's out hunting there, a cubed spacecraft, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well, because I've already actually spoke about that in time past there. Two, I'll be teaching as well on Revelation, or not Revelation chapter 9, sorry. That'll actually be tonight. Joel will be tonight as well, probably in this video that we're doing now. Where is that? Oh, 2 Corinthians chapter 10 there. I really want to go into this as a teaching itself, specifically even with some of the things that Mike said in one of those videos, which is actually the one over on Anthony's channel there. I want to share that with you because biblically, and I'm going to go deeper. I just have that one scripture up there. I'm going to go deeper into that. So let's get right into this, though, because it's kind of a little bit of a lengthy video that I'm going to be doing. And now I want to take, and let's see, we'll go to the minute mark, 1 hour and 21 minutes. And okay, there we go, in 4 seconds. This is where he's going to be talking about the oceans are heating up. And then I'm going to take you to a video that I did on this back in March of 2021, 2 years ago. Listen up.
What?
That right?
No. Ever?
Ever.
Wait.
Ever.
Well, if that's the case, then we're going to have violent storms, aren't we?
You better believe it, and it's not done yet. In fact, the temperature rise of the oceans that has taken place in the last 6 months is more than we've had in the last, I believe they said 62 years.
Are you
But
serious?
it's never been this high. It's not been this high. So all of this is unfamiliar territory.
Wow.
We've not had ocean temperatures this high, not this high. Not, and we're talking about global, not local, but global.
So the solar caps are melting.
All right, now I'm going to place the video here for you in the description below. So those of you that want to listen to these things can go back, listen for yourself there. I think, let's see, I don't know what time Mike actually came on this video. They're probably about an hour into it, something to that effect there. Now, in March 2021, and gosh, I didn't actually put down, let me see which video it is that I have on that, though. I spoke about, oh goodness, did I actually put the minute mark down? All right, that's not, oh my gosh, that's terrible. Let me just see if I can find the right video. See, the problem is once you refresh them, it doesn't go in there, and it must have been this one here, underwater volcanoes erupting. I did not put, let me just see if I can find it. Maybe it was right there. Let's try it out. About this, and also I kind of will look at the, on this article on BBC. I don't know exactly when this article was posted. I'm just wanting to show this on here. They pull all the way down, but you can see the satellite imagery there on Real Earth and their website. They're showing as this thing erupts. Oh, I do have it. I'm sorry. I do have the water. 445. Anyway, those of you that have a regular basis, and he's seeing them as well. So they're just kind of surprised that no one else has actually reported what's going on. That has kind of been kept kind of quiet there. Anyway, if you guys, I don't know how much I've got into this subject yet, as of yet, but in fact, I don't think I've actually spoke about this yet. I don't know if I'll actually do it on this video or not, but I'll at least kind of touch on this a little bit. The one thing that's been disclosed to me just recently is that over the next 8 years, from now until 2029, if you live near, within 200 miles of coastal areas, you need to seriously consider relocation. That's what's been told to me here just recently. And I was very curious as to why. I had not been in a meeting where I could find out. Okay, it may not be the correct video. Let me just see. Volcanoes in the ocean. Let me see if I find the right one, guys. I apologize. Just give me one moment here. What happened, I had everything preset here, and then it all got bumped and messed up. By the way, a lot of these videos are actually on our Patreon channel. That's why I say if you listen to our Patreon channel, you would actually know this information already. And so I'm looking to see, and of course, a lot of them are loaded up through CERN, not through CERN, but through our YouTube channel, Stephen Benoon. So let me just see if I can find, maybe that was it, but might just be in the wrong spot there. So let me jump around there because I really, I do know that the Hypercanes is actually on, but there again, like I said, the Hypercanes is an older video. And the one that, yeah, this one I do talk about the hypercanes. Let me just see. Sketchy as far as what the cause of that accident was, or even the, and recently, is that besides a lot of seismic activity that's going to be going on, and this is one of the updates I'll be giving over on Patreon, is that we're going to have a lot of sinkholes. And we're going to be seeing very unusual weather events. And we're not even talking about storm related, wind related, but not caused by storms. I actually shared some of that information over on Patreon already. That is actually the inline winds and also tornadoes that will appear out of nowhere.
Hey, Jay, good to see you, mate.
And it's all caused from electrical changes. Listen, I don't want to waste the time on this here because I didn't, for some reason, I got something where I put it at. Those of you, I'll put this on control comments. If you could share with us, you might remember where the video is, even if it is still on Patreon, or if I've already released it publicly about the hypercanes.
I am, buddy. How's the boys going, Jay?
Even the inline storms, if you remember, I talked about these, I should say, inline winds, where we would have winds of over 100 miles per hour. That would really be wonderful if you could share that with everybody in the comment section below so that they can see a lot of these things, because these are the things that that Mike is talking about. And of course, in that video with Paul, he actually calls it for the first time hypercanes. And it's something that I was told quite a long time ago. And it had a lot to do. That's why I thought it was on, oh gosh, which video there? I thought it was actually on this one here, because of the fact I'm speaking about the volcanoes erupting globally. And this is where I also talk about the oceans were heating up. Let's just see what we come up with.
And so there's something to do with the orbit of the moon, is my own conjecture, I should say. I'm trying to get a more definitive answer on this issue about the moon.
That just
But
came
the
up,
moon
the orbit
itself,
of the moon
which
just came up
affects
in
the
news
tides on
recently,
the Earth,
because moving
is supposed to
further
affect coastal
it's going to have
areas on a
more of a
global scale.
sudden wave.
The only way that that could happen is if the moon's orb rise, and so I learned pull, that gravitational pull occurs that are heaped up to actually the system basically moving to higher ground. But we know that we're going through a debris field and really starting to peak around 2023. But in 2029, that is supposed to be a year that's really going to create.
Now, here we go there. The debris field. It's going to peak in 2023. And that debris field, though, as I told you guys before, and Mike actually speaks about it on the video as well. I don't think I marked that part. But it's going to hit the satellites around the Earth. It's not so much going to be hitting the Earth. In fact, if you remember, and that's another video if you could post in the description below, because I couldn't remember where that was at or how I titled it. But one of the guys that has worked for me here part-time here and there actually said to me, as a first responder, that for the first time ever, they're being trained on how to deal with casualties from space debris. And of course, I asked to find out what that really was, and I was told that it's not meteorites hitting the Earth from the what's going to happen here in 2023, and it's supposed to be this summer when that happens, but rather from the different satellites that are going to be getting knocked out of orbit and the debris falling back to the Earth there. Now, of course, as always, they anticipate more of that to hit the oceans because the fact that 2/3 of the Earth is with oceans. But nonetheless, it's still supposed to happen, so it's a little bit of a odd thing to think about. So let's back that up just a tad to catch that part again.
Quite extensively as well. But we know that we're going through a debris field and really starting to peak around 2023. But in 2029, that is supposed to be a year that's really going to create a lot of havoc here on the Earth.
Hey, Jeremiah, you're a big fella, aren't you? Your kids must take after you.
So, for what that's worth, I wanted you guys to be aware of that.
I can
did ask again about the situation with these 3 asteroids that are actually coming in that are not being disclosed to the public.
That is another thing that that I discovered later, that the only thing that the reason why they had not hit the earth yet, it wasn't so much of moving them, but it ended up being that it's because it's a matter of the veil coming down. Once the veil comes down, then they will hit the earth. And that's something that we can look at biblically. In fact, if you look at, I think it's Revelation 9 here, and we come back up here, and the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. Now, think about that. I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him, now the star is a him, so no doubt could be Satan himself or one of his minions, whatever the case may be, but that star is a him, and he was given the key to the bottomless pit. I have really held to the idea here recently that the bottomless pit may not necessarily be on the planet Earth itself, but rather another dimension. And that's something that I'll go into later as well. I think it'll probably be the one on Patreon there, where Mike talks about when Paul asked him about the Planet X traveling in the ether. He answers it in a way that I definitely understood what he's talking about, but I realized that people never did. They didn't understand what he's talking about, because he doesn't say, oh yes, it's traveling in the ether. He just begins to talk about CERN and its abilities to, if they have enough power to be able to pierce the veil. There's your answer. Pierce the veil. In other words, Planet X is just behind the veil, or that dimension is what it is. So, and so when you begin to look at the scripture here in Revelation chapter 9, this angel, I suppose, a fallen angel, he's cast from heaven. I saw a star fall from heaven into the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. And I don't think when you say heaven, that necessarily means it comes from our Heavenly Father's domain, but heaven has got multiple layers to it. It can be the outer space, but it falls to earth. All right. And maybe the star has something to do with the way he gets here even. But he's got the key of the bottomless pit. In other words, exactly what it takes to be able to open up that bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit as the smoke of a great furnace. Now, if you ever study anything about Planet X and other documents that are available out there, and when I say other documents, I have to caution you, all right? These are not biblical documents, whether it be the Mayan document, the Kolbrin. They call the Kolbrin a Bible. I don't call the Kolbrin a Bible, period. But it does give a historical account, for what it's worth, about the passing of Planet X. So you have the smoke of a great furnace described in
Hang
there.
on, it's clearing up.
I would love to be able to share some of these things with you, but the thing is, you have to understand. I don't want to do it, and people think, oh, that's just extra biblical. Sure it is. You read the encyclopedia, it's extra biblical. It's not the Bible, right? You read a book that you buy from Books A Million, whether it be a science book or whatever, your school books. They're not biblical. But they're books. They're extra. They're other materials, right? So you have to remember, when you look at things like this, look at it from that aspect. But nonetheless, the smoke of a great furnace, the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. Yeah, if you open up that portal and you allow that star system to come in, it's pretty bad. And there came out of the smoke locust upon the earth. That's interesting. And to them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. And it was commanded them they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. Interesting. Interesting, it says that they're not to hurt the green thing, neither the trees. Typically they want to terraform everything because they're used to desert environments. I kind of think that Joel speaks of that similar thing as well, when he says the appearance of them is the appearance of horses, and as horsemen, so do they run. You know, another thing that was brought up too is like the 3 unclean spirit like frogs. You know, never said that they were frogs, but like frogs, right? A reptilian's got a lizard type of head, very similar to that of a frog, and they have very large feet, kind of like, not webbed, but more like a dinosaur's foot, so it'd be similar to that of a frog's foot. But imagine them as big as horses, though, and like a horseman runs on his two feet, not, and his hands are up here like my shoulders are. Think about something like that, right? I mean, this is about as wacko as things can get, right? Oh my gosh. All right. Let's see here. Now, yeah, and that
They do, yeah.
there, let's see, massive quakes, August 14th. Wow. Boy, I really messed up when I did this, not marking it the right way. I spent all this time to get this thing ready, and then made a lot of mistakes in this. All right, let's go down here though. As many of you already know about the thing about that. So let's just, oh goodness. As your account is being used in another location. Well, that isn't very nice. We gotta stop that from happening right now. Let me see.
Okay, hasn't really
my account. Never had that happen though before. Let's see if we can do it again. Let's try it again. Wow, that's really strange. Well, I guess I could switch to it.
Okay, he hasn't really got that one lined out well, guys. So I thought I'd mix it up a bit.
Crap.
I'll do that Gil Brazard one about Planet X. Pretty sure I loaded it. There it is there.
We've got some exciting information for you today. I've got Gil Broussard with me here again today. And I tell you what, all you have to do is just turn on the TV and you will see Matthew 24:6. That's the verse that Matthew is talking about. There are wars and rumors of wars. That's all you have to do. Turn the TV on. You'll see it everywhere. We're going to be talking about things coming upon this earth during the Great Tribulation. Okay. Now, right now, we're experiencing just a little taste of tribulation. Everybody feels it all around the world. People have lost jobs because of COVID.
Okay, this is a year old, guys.
And supply chain issues, everything. But just like in Luke 21:26, these things coming upon the earth shall make men die for fear of those things coming upon the earth. So let's talk a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about where we are now. Okay. Right as of now, there are no sightings of Planet 7X. So any videos that you may see or anything that says, oh, here it is, no, there's no sightings as of yet. Okay. What are some of the things coming up? We have Passover coming up. Okay. Now, most Christians think that Passover is a Jewish holiday, solely a Jewish holiday. I believe that's incorrect. I believe the Old Testament and the New Testament are correct and intertwined. Okay, so even we as Christians should be celebrating all of these feasts, especially Passover and Sukkot. Okay, we have Passover coming up this next month, April, around the 17th or 18th. Gil's going to be talking about that. So there's exciting times coming up, guys. Exciting times, and I hope that you're preparing. I hope that you're preparing spiritually. I hope you're preparing your physical body with money, food, storing things up. And now I'd like to introduce my wonderful friend Gil Broussard. He's a wonderful amateur astronomer, and we're going to be going through pretty much the whole timeline of the Great Tribulation. So here he is, Gil Broussard.
Well, thank you, Jim. It's a pleasure to be on your show. And just as you were saying, we're in the times of tribulation. We're not in the Great Tribulation, but we're in the beginning. We're in the phases that the Bible calls tribulation. And it does says we will go through tribulation, which we are. Many Christian and Jews and everyone that's going through these economic times, the viruses and everything else associated with that. And that is correct. There is no sighting of Planet X at the moment, or Planet 7X, whichever way you want to call it. There's sundogs, there's lens flares, but it's not a valid sighting. Whenever you do see it, it will look like a comet, and 90% of the time you'll see it in a nighttime sky or early morning, whenever it does show. And Passover, because we have a 8-hour bet coming up, the barley is not right. Looks like Passover might be near the 16th and 17th of April. And that means we have one more practice run. These are not, many people call them feasts, but the actual Hebrew word is rehearsal pattern. And that's what you're to do. This is one of the ones that you are required to be in Israel to practice the rehearsal, being at the appointed place and appointed time, which is Passover, and in Jerusalem. So after that is Sukkot. That would bring us to around possibly November 9th. Remember, all of these dates are flexible because the moon has to be sighted, okay? So you could be a day or two off on these days right here. So November 9th would be Sukkot, and that would be aligning, if we were to look at Jacob's story, where he traveled a year and a half to make it back to Israel. And where we get that year and a half is from this chart I'll show you, where we take the artifact, the Nebra sky disk, which is an artifact where we use astronomy to date it. It gives us the exact date, the mid of the drought, which he had a 7-year drought. This was the midpoint of it. And that Jacob entered Egypt on the 2nd year of the drought. So we can calculate that back to where that ties in.
Oh, man.
Then for us to figure out what years that he worked for his wives at the time, we have to take the timeline of the Second Temple, which was a Jubilee when it was destroyed, which is actually 68. There's a 2-year error in Roman history. Astronomy proves this error out, that the 70 AD Roman year is actually 68 on the Gregorian calendar. So you take this back into the BC time period. That means you have to subtract a year on the you have to add a year to AD and add a year to the BC to get to the correct date and time. And now we can transfer and find where the Jubilees were. And once we have the Jubilees, we can count off of that where the Sabbath years were of 7, because that's what this length of his contracts were. And that gives us one particular time, and that gives us a count of him traveling to Israel, where he arrived on Sukkot, it says in the Bible. And it took him about a year and a half to travel. And that makes quite a bit of sense, because in wintertime, he'd have to stop pretty much on his travels, because he had to stay where there's plenty of food and water for his animals. So travel in wintertime would have been very, very limited. So that makes quite good sense. It was 400 miles actually from southern Turkey all the way to Israel. So that would bring us to this October 9th of possibly being the parallel to him making it to Israel. And that may not be a practice run anymore. That would be this year, Sukkot. It has a high probability of not being a practice run. That'll be the real event that we need to be in Israel. From that point on, that's when we'll probably see SEAL 4 start.
So what
which is
start?
where a war and
War.
viruses are pluralized, and it talks about 1/4 world population dying. So this issue that's going on with Miss Ukraine might escalate slowly within the next 6 to 7 months here. That would lead us to a World War III. It doesn't mean Russia and America are the ones that fires a nuclear missile first. There's other countries, especially Iran and a few other countries. So if Iran fires a missile at Israel, or Israel has to take out a threat in Syria because it's a nuclear device, that would probably start World War III, where each ally who has a contract with the other one would have to help the other person with nuclear weapons, basically. And this could lead up to what the Bible says about 1/4 world population dying. We don't know if it's going to be a nuclear war that causes the death. This is a speculation. We don't know this. But tensions are high. We do know.
Well, since then, Russia invaded Ukraine.
These players have nuclear weapons, and so far, every weapon that has ever been made has been used, except for the nuclear weapons. Well, except for Japan, it was used there. But so this is a very high concern for me for the times that we're living in at the moment. So we have one more practice. I suggest people learn and use it to their best advantage to learn the layout of Jerusalem, the old city, where to put your tent for Sukkot, and get a feel for the area.
Right. You're exactly right. Like I said earlier, just turn the TV on. You'll see Matthew 24:6 right there in front of your eyes. Now, Gil, the chart that you've made of to figure out how long it took Jacob to actually travel back to Jerusalem. This chart is extremely interesting and very intricate and everything. I know you took a whole lot of time with that. I know you touched on it just a little bit, but can you drill down just a little bit and explain to the viewers how you came about to that year? Was it a year or year and a half time travel? Now, I know that they had children, a lot of flocks and everything. I mean, these guys were basically super rich for back then, whenever they had cattle and stuff. But can you touch on that some more?
Well, when you know that, first you have to figure out when he entered the land and when his contract with 20 years started. Mm-hmm. Remember, he stated when he went to leave Laban that he worked for him for 20 years. So, and then once he was in Jerusalem, near Shechem, where he arrived there for Sukkot, he stayed there a year before he traveled to Bethlehem, where Rachel had died. Mm-hmm. And she was buried into a cave. I think there's some parallels there that I may or may not get into there. But looking at his timeline, because remember, it says how old he was when he entered Egypt, which was he entered on the 2nd year. And we can back calculate and that it took him a year and a half. Because we can now lay out where the Sabbath years were and the Jubilees were. Now this is as best we can do, because the Bible doesn't give us an exact timeline. This is one of the few times the data is missing, and there's a reason for that, because he says for us to be watching. So this is an estimate. This is as close as we can get using the artifacts we have. It's not so much of a guess, but it still could be off a little bit. So the midpoint of the orbit of planet 7X was this Passover. Okay, so that means anytime that's close to that midpoint of travel is the most likely time that it will come back, as far as arrival.
Now,
before or after it.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you mean this past Passover was that midpoint, or this coming one?
No, the coming one.
Okay.
That would be using the Carrington event.
Mm-hmm.
I have to look up the time frame for the Carrington event.
I think it was, wasn't it 1859? It happened in 1859.
That sounds about right. And that, let me get a file here to look at. Yeah, 1859 it was. And that marks the midway point, the farthest point that our planet X or planet 7X was away from the sun, because the sun reacted to it, and that's what caused the CME. So now that was its midway point. Now, did it run into any objects or have interference from any of the other planets? Possibly. We're in that danger zone. We're in a very strong area here, biblically, as well as astronomy-wise, for us to look very intensely in the next coming Sukkot, which would be around September, slightly before that, maybe after that, whether or not we see Planet X. This is, I call it, at the beginning of my research, I called it a planet because we didn't have enough data, but right now I can tell you that it's a planet-sized comet, is what it actually is. NASA may give it a whole new category and call it something else, but it's still going to be a giant-sized comet.
Right.
This wreaks havoc on Earth. Matter of fact, the Bible tells us the next time this planet passes, that it's the worst time in all of Earth's history. And there's few words that I can say to qualify that. In other words, Noah's flood was not the worst. This next event is.
Right.
And
The next event is, it's just going to be beyond imagination. I mean, just like I said at the beginning, Luke 21:26, men's heart shall fail for seeing those things coming upon the earth, and those things coming upon the earth. It mentions it's not just like a meteor shower. Like you go out and see, meteor bing, bing, coming through. This is going to be a meteor storm, and the meteors are going to have the weight of a talent. Now, this next slide goes into that in great detail. Can you explain this next slide and explain your calculations about this meteor storm, this coming meteor storm, and how you figured out the weight of a talent, weight of these meteors, and what kind of impact that they're going to have on us?
Sure. The Revelation 16:21 says, "And there fell upon men great hail out of heaven, every stone about the weight of a talent." And talent, according to my calculation, we reverse engineered the Hebrew units, comes up to 57 pounds.
Wow.
And we can calculate like how large would an iron sphere would be if it was 57 pounds. It ends up being 7.26 inches, where 7.25 inches is a diameter. And then you have to figure out the speed, which we use the astronomy software on the last hour of its travel, reaching Earth's orbit. We don't want to know the speed where it was at the fastest point, which is right next to the sun. We want to know what speed it would be right at Earth. And it turns out when we measure the distance within an hour of its travel, it's traveling 97,380 miles per hour. And we're able to take that would be equal to the fragments, the comet fragments hitting Earth. And that we can enter into formulas, and it tells us what sort of kinetic energy we are dealing with. And this is equivalent to, let's get the figures right here, 11,725 pounds of TNT.
Wow. And Gil, just to give the viewers like a physical representation of about how big that is. I know you said it's about 7 inches in diameter and everything, but guys, if anybody's visited a gym or goes to the gym or anything, they have these things. I believe they're called kettle balls. Something that's just like Gil's describing, a spherical iron ball with handles on it. Just imagine one of those weighing about 57 pounds, thousands of them showering down upon the Earth.
Wow.
That's just a physical representation that you can actually go and put your hands on.
The next slide we have, I have the calculation sheet that a friend of mine, a NASA engineer, he helped me with some of the calculations because they get quite it's in depth, and it gives us the radiuses on certain areas of damage, whether it's bodily injury and structural damage. So I was able to plot these rings on a map. This is just one comet fragment hitting the Earth, and you, just like Jim said, there's thousands and thousands of them. So the inner ring, the first inner ring, which is in red, is 2,931 feet radius. You have a pressure zone right in that of 1,373 pounds per square inch. The wind speed is 8,788 miles per hour within that ring. You're instantly dead within this first red ring. Instant death happens. And then if you go out to the second ring where the cyan, that's 4,465 feet. PSI is at 55, wind speed 1,759. And then you go out to the next one there, which is another red one up placed there. That's 20 PSI at 4,780 feet radius. Winds are 1,061 miles per hour. This is the 100% fatality ring right here, because the first ring is when everybody's dead. This second red ring, that they'll die within the next week or two from the injuries, because your lungs are injured, you have flying debris, everything, your organs are damaged, you die within days, hours or days or weeks, but that's a fatal zone.
Wow. And just to give our viewers like a physical representation of that, just imagine, guys, a normal tire on your car is inflated to anywhere from like 35 to 45 pounds of pressure. So just imagine if you're right there in front of that tire and it just explodes right there. Gil has this on his previous chart as threshold of lung damage at that those pounds per square inch, and also your eardrums would be completely ruptured 100%.
Yes, depending whether or not you have the full force of the pressure wave hitting you. Now, the last ring for the damage where the glass in the buildings are cracked, that's over 5,177 feet radius. The winds are 119 miles per hour, and that's at 0.25. That's a quarter of a pound pressure. It's right there of 1 psi. That will break and shatter windows in homes and stuff. So this was quite shocking. I didn't realize that a comet fragment. At first we did meteor strikes, but it's not a meteor. This is a comet. A comet travels many times faster. Meteor would travel maybe 40,000 miles per hour. Where this is traveling.
There you go. I never knew the difference between a meteor and what was it? A meteor and a comet. I didn't know the difference.
Travels many times faster. Meteor would travel maybe 40,000 miles per hour. Where this is traveling, let's see, 70, I think, let's see, what is it? 97,380 miles per hour. The kinetic energy associated with this is immense.
And Gil, this chart here, that just represents just one of those talents, right?
Correct.
Wow.
I mean, just one of them. Little town that I'm in, about 16,000. They want to take like two to three of these to wipe out everybody in the town. Just about. Wow. You still have some injured, but the majority of the town would be wiped out or devastated. And keep in mind, a storm shelter underneath the ground, in most of this area, you would die anyway. In most, I don't know which ring it would be, equal to a storm shelter underground if you were underground at the time. The shock wave would still bruise your brain and cause massive damage. You'd probably have to be something like 30, 40 stories underground. And then your entrance would probably cave in, therefore you're locked on the ground. The Bible says for the ones that go on the ground, that's their tomb. I think that's a very good estimate.
Right. Well, Gil, let's talk about some of the effects on this next slide of what the planet has done in the past. The plasma catching our planet, and what has it done to our orbit in the past?
Well, in the past, we can go back and look at, we have records throughout multiple, like 20, 30 civilizations that stayed around the time of Hezekiah, which is exactly when it happened. We have an artifact that gives us the date and the hour that this event occurred. That's the Nebra sky disk. And that's when the calendar year changed from 360 to 365 and a quarter days as it is today, right now. Isaiah in the book of Psalms says now the feasts are connected to the moon. Okay, before that, you didn't need it because it was 30-day months. You didn't need a moon to count. It just needed to know when the barley was ripe to make the first fruit offerings, and you started counting 30 days after that. But after the calendar changed, we had to have it linked to the moon, which is the Hebrew calendar today. And I was curious on how far did Earth's orbit change. Remember, to go from 360 to 365, it had to go outward. The orbital path of Earth has to expand to where it gives us 365 and a quarter days. The calculations tell me that Earth moved 1,333 miles to its new orbit. Well, if you use Earth as a unit of measure, Earth is 7,917 miles across, and use it as a unit of measure. How many Earths, the bodies of Earth would fit in other words, into this distance, it moved Earth 168 diameters of it outward. It pulled it away from the sun, 168 diameters. Okay, what's interesting is Enoch is talking about a future date in a near future now that will be 364-day year. Well, that's never occurred. The only two dates that we've had as far as the calendar year was 360 and 365 and a quarter. So this is a future event, and that's going to happen when Wormwood hits Earth, which is the second meteor shower, which is 150 days away from the first meteor shower. We have two of them. And this is when, in that meteor shower, a large mountain-sized asteroid hits Earth, which is called Wormwood. Earth is split, it says, fractured. That impact, according to the Bible, says that every wall on Earth is either cracked or crumbled. And it hits us on the nighttime side of Earth. The first one is during the daytime. Second one is at nighttime. The second one pushes us slightly closer to the sun. And according to the calc, for it to change our orbit to 364, it means it has to move us basically 40 Earth diameters closer to the sun.
Wow, that is absolutely amazing. That just shows you the power of this thing. I mean, something grabbing hold of the Earth and dragging it through space 168 times its own diameter. And
right, we were dragged on the first one, but the second one, remember, this is an impact that's moving us to 40.
Mm-hmm.
Big difference.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
So,
let's talk about this next slide here. How the Gulf of Mexico was created. You know, if anybody looks at a map, they can kind of see kind of a little circle there, like, you know, going through Florida, Alabama, on over Mississippi, Louisiana, like that. It kind of sort of looks like a circle. And there was actually a study done several years ago by a team of researchers that actually concluded that was a meteor strike, but they were told not to say anything about it. I cannot remember the lady's name, but I just remember that she was threatened. Her position at the university was
okay. She didn't say it was the Gulf of Mexico. She said there was a larger one, that the Chicxulub was not the one that killed dinosaurs. And she was absolutely correct that it was a larger event.
Right.
And she almost lost her career. She said we had called her and talked to her, and she said she would never wish she wished she never made that statement because it changed her career. Even though it was a team of scientists that she just announced it because the team concluded this. It was an international team. They had people from France, Belgium, Germany, and so on, and they concluded this. And it ruined their career by just making that statement because they don't want people to know this.
Right, right. But if you're over the target, that's when you're going to get the most flack.
Yeah, the Yucatan and Cuba was much further south. There's a crack in the Gulf, outside the Gulf, that's causing those two land masses to move north. Cuba's moving more like north, and then the Yucatan is more moving northwest. But if you place them back down where they were before, and South America was touching Cuba at the time, and it makes a ring. It makes a perfect ring, a circle. You can see a lake is cut in half at Florida. A crater rim makes a double rim. You can clearly see the double rim off the coast of Florida. The landmass of half of Louisiana has collapsed into the Gulf once, and it's fixing to do it a second time here. That's why there's so much oil there, because it's buried plant life. But my first calculations, I had calculated with the speed of it being a meteor. And that would have been something like 210 miles across for a meteor to hit to make 1,100-mile crater. But if it's a comet fragment traveling at the same speed as what we quoted earlier of the 97,380 miles per hour, it only needed to be 50 miles across to make the same size crater, the Gulf of Mexico. And this happened at the end of Noah's flood. Whenever, remember, the Noah's flood started, and it was 40 days of rain, and then the water didn't recede until the 150 days later. That's when he said a great wind, and he saw the water recede. Well, that great wind was the pressure wave from the impact. It knocked off 71% of our crust globally on the backside of the. It wasn't in the Gulf of Mexico that this debris is lost. It's on the backside of Earth that it knocked it off. 71% of it is exact volume of our moon. There's an error in the Bible where it says that he made the moon and the stars. And it doesn't say that in Hebrew. Moon is not there. And it doesn't say and the stars. It says he made a greater light and a lesser light, and the lesser light was the stars. That's what it actually says in Hebrew. The physical name moon is not mentioned to the dream of Joseph when he was 17. That's the first time the word moon is mentioned in the Bible. And that was some time like, what, 700 years after the flood.
Yeah, and Gil, I think that we talked about this before, but after
Hi, Lynn, good to see ya.
All the debris that was like in basically a low outer space orbit around Earth, didn't it take like 300 or 400 years for that to come together into what we now know as the moon?
For it to coalesce, NASA has pictures showing that they were able to categorize sections of the moon, and it's pieced together with large chunks, which they don't have an answer for that.
Right.
And the German scientists that come up with that said it was between 200 to 300 years. Well, it's closer to 300 years because we have an artifact during the time of when the Tower of Babel was destroyed. It dates it, and it shows that we had a moon at the time. And so he was actually correct. It took about 300 years for it to form, for it to coalesce into a spherical shape.
And isn't it odd that we have had men on the moon that brought samples back and everything, but it's a federal crime to own any kind of moon dust or anything like that. It's probably because if anybody analyzed it, it would have the same composition as the Earth's crust today.
Well, they've already analyzed that. They said that the samples where they took, remember, they didn't take it in, all over the moon,
right.
But the first samples that they were testing said it was tested to the same consistency at the bottom of the ocean. Well, it depends on what side of the continental crust that you're testing, because whatever way the piece had landed, whether or not it would be the bottom of the ocean, which would be the inside layer instead of the top. That's exactly what you would find, that it would be the same consistency, because that's where it came from.
Right, that's an excellent point. Right.
And remember where there was an article where the moon rock they gave to the Netherlands was petrified wood, and they assumed that it was a fake because it was petrified. Not necessarily. Not necessarily, because it came from Earth and it had petrified.
Okay, Tricky, God bless, mate. Sleep well.
Because it doesn't take long for wood to be petrified. They've already proven that. If it's in the right conditions. So that's probably came from the moon, and they just didn't notice it. It was petrified wood.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And even if they would have found samples from NASA, NASA would not come out and tell you they found petrified wood in there. They would not. Anything that proves out the biblical story, just like they're not willing to say the Gulf of Mexico is a meteor crater. Or they claim that there's a problem with heat. Well, there isn't a problem with heat because the Earth was flooded at the time. Therefore, the impact that was a second event, it hit when the Earth was flooded. Therefore, it cancels out the heat issue. So you can have such a large impact. And they're just not calculating it correctly.
Right, and I believe you have a slide that shows the seismic rings and everything of that impact that you calculated.
Yes, the size, they have the seismic ring, they have the fireball, they have the crater and everything. I show that. Keep in mind the fireball would not have occurred like that because it's the whole Earth was flooded at the time. It would have quenched a lot of the heat issue. These are my this is what I recalculated to figure out at the speed of 97,000 miles how big of an object would it take, and it ends up being 49.7 miles across. And it's a steel object. Most common fragments are just metallic, very, very dense.
Yeah.
And so, these are dangerous objects that are coming towards Earth on the next event.
Right. Well, Gil, we certainly appreciate all the time that you spend doing these calculations and everything. I mean, they're just absolutely fascinating. But let's kind of go back just a little bit to you got to spend some time in China with one of your past jobs and everything, and this was back when you really weren't aware or didn't believe that there was like another object and in space, that could come by and do this. But you found some documents that led you down this path that you've been down for many years now. Can you talk about those documents a little bit?
Sure. I spent almost a year when I was in the oil field in China, and I was most of that time I only had about 4 weeks of work. The rest of the time I was on standby. So I was able to go to all of their museums and a bunch of others. Not all of them, I have to say. It's a lot of them, but it wasn't all. So there's a bunch. And I was able to take pictures of artifacts and everything like that. But I wasn't interested in Planet X yet, not until I came back. And a lot of the stuff I saw on the internet didn't make sense because it was violating a lot of principles of astronomy. And at that time, I knew what a lens.
Okay.
To follow information about terrified neighborhoods taking to the street. What if you walked out your front door tomorrow morning and found that the sky was totally eclipsed by what appeared to be unidentified alien craft? What if you ran back into the house only to discover every emergency television station on Earth broadcasting frantic, esoteric, difficult to follow information about terrified neighborhoods taking to the streets, rioting, fighting over dwindling resources while others lock themselves inside their homes and bunker down for what might be weeks without any tangible or coherent explanation of what is happening all over the Earth? Would people be clamoring for a savior figure to step in and make sense of it all? To step in and restore peace? Will we soon face a world-changing event just like the one I'm describing? Today's guest is here to help us prepare for what may be coming at us sooner than later. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Skywatch TV. What a treat we have in store for you today. Before we dive into today's panel, let me introduce our special guest. He's an Air Force veteran, author, radio show commentator, podcaster, and public speaker. He's the writer of Gen 6 Productions' Mega Drought and the Lies of Men and Gods. Please welcome Mr. Daniel Holdings. If you missed last week, we talked about the Vatican's interest in alien disclosure. The idea that ETs are out in the sky. Why are we looking at
Oh, I have to look that
through
up.
the large binocular, the Lucifer device? Why does the Vatican have such a vested interest in following the activity of aliens and unidentified flying objects? We also talked briefly about mandatory vaccines and the condition of the world being prepared for what might look like the Book of Revelation. Today, the subject of discussion will be centered around the brand new movie by Steve Quayle, Lies of Men and Gods, Exposing the Fallen Angel Agenda, the Genetic Corruption and Destruction of the Human Race. And Daniel is the lead writer and co-producer. Welcome back, Daniel. So good to have you. If you missed last week, you really got to go back because it was the beginning of a special investigation series that we're doing on this topic. Let's get back into the conversation. We're talking about aliens. You used the words last week, fallen angels. I've heard my father, Tom, and Derek both use the terms many, many times, watchers, when describing entities or fallen angels or aliens. Do you think that these aliens are the watchers that the pseudepigraphal books of the Bible speak about?
Yeah, that's a great question, because let me take you back to Genesis, in the garden, right? And it says in Genesis 1 that the serpent was more cunning than all the rest. That's always bothered me. The serpent, that's reptilian.
Yeah.
That's a dragon. That's not a human. That's not what we would consider a cherub, because Don, as you know, Lucifer's a fallen cherub, right? So that's not the picture that you have.
Right.
So where does this terminology come from? As I was writing the data points, I'll call them, for the movie, again, going back to the fact that your father was on the Unholy See with us, he said something just as an afterthought in that interview. And it was just, again, it was a kind of a disjointed thing, but just he wanted to throw it in there. And he said, and you know, the pseudepigraphal books say that the watchers were reptilian. I was like, man, that makes perfect sense. Tom, what do you think of that whole idea of the serpent in the garden? Was that one of the watchers?
Well, I think that the fallen angels have a relation with each other. One of them was the head of all the rest of them. Many people believe that that was what was manifest in the garden as a, quote, serpent, or maybe even a fiery flying seraphim, which is also in the scripture, which are denoted with reptilian-like features. When Steve Quayle and I were in the Four Corners talking to the tribal elders down there, they pointed out to us that in many of the petroglyphs that they have painted these objects, and many of these predating the life of Christ, the time of Jesus Christ, are thousands of years old. And they can tell because as they get older, the whatever it was they use for ink gets darker and darker. It's like a tarry-like subject matter. But they pointed out to us that if you go there, you can see the earliest stories of creation, as well as when a portal opened above Mount Graham, which we had gone to, and we got a lot of the legend out of there, but also in the Four Corners. And you can see this spiral that they draw opening. And what is coming through it? It is a reptilian entity that comes through to deceive. Dr. Don Mose told us the same thing. PhD, we went to the Navajo Nation, told us the same thing, that this entity came through and started deceiving all of the nations of the world, to go into their kivas, to go into their underground holy places, their version of a church, if you will, or a chapel, and to start conducting witchcraft. That's what the serpent taught them how to do. Then they became cannibalistic. They started eating one another. So it led them to this horrible place. But I think they're also describing what is spoken of in the Dead Sea Scrolls when it describes one of these entities by the name of Makarisha. And it is described as very serpent-like, very dark, like an adder, very destructive and terrible. And when you go into the Four Corners area, they're painting this creature coming through a vortex to deceive the nations of the world.
what's really interesting about the Bible is that we tend to think of the Watchers, and most people who've heard of the term of the Watchers associate them with the book of First Enoch and the sons of God, who, according to Jude and Peter, are now in the abyss. Peter, 2 Peter 2:4, is specific in saying that they're in Tartarus, which is a level below Hades. But we see in Daniel chapter 4 the punishment of Nebuchadnezzar for his pride. Nebuchadnezzar's dream. I saw in the visions of my head as I lay in bed, and behold, a watcher, a holy one, came down from heaven. And then verse 17, the sentence is by decree of the watchers, the decision by the word of the holy ones. Apparently, this is a class of angelic being or supernatural being with some power and authority given to them by God. Some of them, obviously from Daniel, are still faithful, but there appears to be others who have chosen badly, like most of us humans. There is none righteous, no, not one. Well, apparently in the spirit realm, many of them have exercised free will to rebel as well. So yes, I think these watchers could in fact be some of these entities that are in the movie Lies of Men and Gods.
Yeah.
So when you see the film, because again, we'll go through the evidence, but you can't separate the fact that those things have been buried for thousands of years, and all of a sudden they're showing watchers on them. They're showing reptilian angels. And you know, the idea that Lucifer was a cherub, cherubs aren't supposed to look reptilian as far as my understanding goes.
Right.
So we like to think of things in Christian terms, that things go this way, this way, this way, and this way. What I think we are seeing is the idea that we don't know nothing.
Right. And you skipped by that so quickly for the viewers at home. You talked about this expedition where you guys actually go and dig and bring up these old ancient artifacts. Just unpack that for a little bit, because we moved past it so quickly. Give some context to that adventure.
So there have been two expeditions that Gen 6 is funded, that Steve Quayle is funded specifically. And the first one occurred 2021. The second one occurred last year. What we did, because some of those artifacts were brought to our director of antiquities down there, Jesse, and he didn't see them dug out of the ground. So there have been a lot of comments, well, those are fake. Those aren't
Sure.
Okay.
Wasn't there, didn't see it, pull it out.
Exactly.
Right.
And they look too good to be fake. So what Steve purposed to do is he wanted to capture on camera every shovel, every cutting down of a branch, every cutting down of a tree, using geo radar to find these things and dig them out on camera. So what we found, there's a huge hole. It's like 8 feet tall. And again, every shovel, you see every shovel undone, you see branches, roots being cut, and these artifacts being pulled out, showing Toltecs, Aztecs, Mayans, all interacting with aliens. Ancient history coming alive on camera. Now, that was part of the impetus for this movie. Wait a minute. We have evidence. We have seen this.
Right.
And so, therefore, why is it that they are telling us that they don't know anything about this, but yet these aliens have been around for thousands and thousands of years?
It's like we farm out the authoritative final conclusion to the government to tell us what the reality behind all of this is, when we can discern with our own eyes what we're seeing. These were ancient objects that all depicted the same types of interactions with something or someone or some beings from outer space or from above, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And even more than that, though, why are we farming out the answers to these questions to the New Agers who want to tell us that these are our space brothers who are coming back to help us ascend?
Yeah, well, they're getting that from the Vatican. So, because that's what the Vatican, they're Opus Dei level theologians, are writing papers on this, and it's a slow process to go through to be accepted as doctrine, but they're working on it at the Pope's Academy.
Again, another data point, exactly what you just said. When we went back and we looked at what you and Chris Putnam found down at the Vatican, and those comments about Opus Dei theologians working on new doctrine, accepting our alien brothers. Francis just a couple of years ago said, yeah, we'll baptize aliens. And then a few years later, he said, well, maybe because we know that we're fallen and they're not, maybe they will come baptize us in a new understanding. Folks, this is the great deception. This is what we need to understand. This has been developed for decades, if not hundreds of years, and we are at the culmination of that deception. Joe, you asked me last program why there's an increase in frequency of UFO sightings. Because of that. Because they are about to unveil just what you and Chris found. They are about to unveil the Antichrist, or at least his representative of them, and they will tell us that they made us. They will tell panspermia, the the old panspermia is that aliens seeded life on this planet. They will say that Christ was an alien and he was superior to us, and then we would be called to worship them.
Right.
That is what this is coming to, the great deception.
I don't think that every person that would identify as Catholic subscribes to all of this. So excluding those that are totally not buying the idea that they have any personal interest in ET or UFO disclosure. We know in point of fact, though, Tom, that there are those in the Vatican at the very high level who are very preoccupied with this idea of aliens.
Well, but I have a lot.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I have a lot of quotes here, but we asked Brother Guy Consolmagno that very question before we went up to Mount Graham. And by the way, you don't just get in your car and drive up to Mount Graham and jump out and say, we're here to see the aliens. You know, you have to have permission. We went up we went up with a guide. He got us past all the locking.
We had to wear security badges.
Yeah, you were there, me and you and Chris Putnam. Yeah. But before we went, I interviewed Brother Consolmagno because he is the director of the Vatican astronomy groups. He's the Pope's personal astronomer, all those kind of things. So I wanted to get, to the bottom line. And here's an interesting story. I'll make it very quick. He had written a book called Intelligent Life in the Universe. They were heralding this before it came out. As everybody had great anticipation.
Yeah.
I signed up, paid for it to get it early. Literally the week it came out, I got a refund. They pulled the book, took it off the market literally as soon as it came out. I'm like, now the mystery's really growing, right? So I wanted to know why that was the case. Anyway, I asked Brother Consolmagno about it. He gave me a gibberish kind of an answer. But then I asked him, and this was breakthrough. I said, well, is there any way I could get a copy of the PDF of the book since it was pulled so quickly? And he surprised me by sending it to me. You read through that book, and he makes the case that the Nephilim are what today we would call aliens, right? And he even makes the case that this represents a high angelic order, that they're going to be coming back, and they could be our saviors. But then he goes further. And let me just give this to you very quickly. When I asked him, does the Vatican's top astronomer actually need to say that the Nephilim from the Bible are an example of the kind of space saviors that we could soon look to for salvation? He sent me his book, and he highlighted this part of his book where that incredible association is only surpassed by this. And here's what he says, and I'm quoting from his book. In quoting John 10:16, which says, "And other sheep I have, which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd." And then Consolmagno follows that by saying this: "Perhaps it is not so far-fetched to see the second person of the Trinity, Jesus, the Word, who was present in the beginning," John 1:1, "coming to lay down his life and to take it up again," John 10:18, "not only as the Son of Man, but also as a child of these other races." So then I emailed him back and I said, literally? Really? You're telling me Jesus is the star child of an alien race, that the Immaculate Conception was actually an abduction scenario in which aliens took Mary and impregnated her with this divine seed? He wouldn't answer. No more questions following that, but it's in his book. And I have sent that book to different people who've asked for it. But when I make that assertion, they're like, you've got to be putting me on. Yeah. But it's his words, it's in his book. And I think they pulled it because it was right at the same time they're coming, they might be our saviors. Like you just said a moment ago, we're not going to be baptizing them. They're going to be baptizing us.
One of the other people in that movie that we, from our original footage that didn't make the Unholy See, was Leo Zagami. Leo Zagami's a researcher, right. That kind of thing. Well, Leo Zagami got a picture of Father
Consolmagno.
That guy. He got a picture of him and the head Satanist doing an exorcism in Rome. Now, and he says this: how can the head Satanist work with an exorcist from the Catholic Church? Mm-hmm. So there is this
literally Satan casting out Satan.
Exactly, exactly. There is an underlying story woven under here that they do not want the general public to find out, even to our Catholic brothers and sisters that faithfully worship Jesus. That's not who we're talking to. We're talking about the Jesuits. We're talking about the people that are doing satanic worship according to testimony at a special location in Rome. This goes far deeper than what we're talking about here, just aliens.
Yeah, I'll follow that when we come back from the break. Yeah, something that Malachi Martin told.
We're going to take a quick break so that you can learn how you can get your copy of Lies of Men and Gods. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
There is a huge web of deception that has been intentionally woven into the underbelly of everything we perceive to be reality here on Earth. And it is compounded by falsehoods uttered from the lips of our governments, militaries, and even the Vatican. But what is the lie? And what is at stake? Skywatch TV is proud to present the Lies of Men and Gods Hyper Video Collection when you order the new documentary film by Steve Quayle and Daniel Holding. One 844-750-4985.
Welcome back to Skywatch TV. The subject of discussion today is Lies of Men and Gods, the film by Steve Quayle. And of course, we're in studio with the lead writer and co-producer, Mr. Daniel Holdings. I want to get right back into the interview. That was outrageous where we had to leave for the break there. Right before the break, though, Tom, you had kind of teased that you had something you wanted to add. But before you jump in, I want to set up this question. And I'd love to get all your reactions to this. I think the question in the room is, why? If the Vatican has interest in following outer space, they believe they're in touch with some higher entity or a space brother or UFOs or alien beings, or even if they were to tell you, behind the smoke and mirrors, yes, we totally believe in the idea of demons. What is the point of their participation then in a great deception? What do they get out of that relationship?
Well, I think, first of all, it's because they are true believers. Corrado Balducci, who was an exorcist, but he was the Vatican spokesperson on the aliens and what are they and are they real, and he was a true believer that they were real, but he went further than that. Might have even got him killed. He went on Italian television. They produced a documentary film, and he started kind of spilling the beans about how the Vatican not only believes it's possible, but are already in contact with these entities, he hinted, making deals with them. He said that they're collecting information about their agenda through their embassies around the world. He went on, and then right after that, oops, suddenly he's dead, right? So I think maybe he started spilling the beans. But the point is this, even if that's not true, the Vatican believes in it enough that they're trying to put themselves out there as the answer source, because they believe it's going to happen. And when it does happen, it's going to bring the world to its knees. And people are not only going to be looking for technological questions and things like that, but spiritual questions. Yeah. Who are they? What are they? Are they also part of God's creation? That's why they are addressing all of this stuff. In fact, the Opus Dei theologian for the church, Father Tanzalamiti, that you briefly mentioned before the break, he's even writing the paper for the Vatican on this, and he is saying that once we have confirmation of a religious nature from an extraterrestrial source, you will not be required to deny your faith in the beginning. However, once the information is verified, I don't know how you're going to verify alien religion information, but once it is verified, he said it then will require us to do a rereading of the gospel as we know it, inclusive of the new revelation that is coming from an alien source. So they are full on preparing themselves for this. Now, one other thing real quickly, I don't want to dominate. Father Malachi Martin was actually providing answers to this over a decade ago, and it started when he was on Art Bell. And Art Bell said, Father, why did the Vatican force themselves onto a mountain in southeastern Arizona, where Chris Putman and I went and Joe went? Why did they do that? Why did they fight in federal court to get up there? And his answer was classic. He said it's because at the highest level of geopolitics in the Vatican, they know what is approaching the earth and that it will be of the utmost importance in coming years. We asked, remember, when we visited with the Jesuit astronomer who was on duty at Mount Graham, we asked him, why did he say that? And he basically said, well, the only thing we're using, the Large Binocular Telescope and the Lucifer device for these days, is we are focused on a certain part of deep space where we believe that there is alien intelligence on another world. And we're like, are you really telling us this right now? I mean, what? So it was a pretty amazing visit. But one final other thing, Malachi Martin in the books you're reading, Windswept House right now, he wrote the Final Conclave. He wrote all those books. Malachi Martin was an insider at the Vatican. He studied the Dead Sea Scrolls before the public was even aware that they were made. He was in on the secrets of Fatima. He was a polyglot. He could speak something like 16 or 17 languages. He was translating the Dead Sea Scrolls for the Vatican. He was a friend of the Pope, and then they let him go, and he started writing all these books. But interestingly, he said this: when was the doo-doo going to hit the fan? He said, when a Jesuit is elected the Pope at the Vatican. We have the very first Jesuit Pope now in history, in the person of Pope Francis. He said, when that happens, that will set in motion the Vatican's connection to the rise of a new world order and the arrival of Antichrist and the false prophet. That's what he said.
That's essentially the plot of Windswept House. And I'm only about 40 pages in, but the reason I picked it up is because it describes a satanic ritual taking place inside St. Paul's Chapel at Vatican City in 1963. He said that the events depicted in Windswept House, 95% true, the characters 85% real, and the plot, quoting now, it tells the story of an international organized attempt by Vatican insiders and secular internationalists to force a pope of the Catholic Church to abdicate, which you predicted, Benedict, in 2013, so that a successor may be chosen who will fundamentally change Orthodox faith and establish a new world order.
Which is exactly
this was written in 1996. 1996, and it's coming. We're seeing it unfold right before our eyes.
Gentlemen, what do you think in terms of timing? We don't here at Skywatch TV like to be date setters, but you look at the signs and symptoms and they seem really obvious and very much gaining speed and very much being picked up all over the world. The frequency we talked about last week, Daniel, of sightings and visitations. But do you think that we are eminently going to experience what I described at my open, this chaotic moment, like the film with Will Smith, Independence Day, where you just, the governments of the world lose control of their ability to decide when this message is revealed. And we just are suddenly, we find ourselves happening upon this great big reveal, and it's just chaos.
Of course, the word says that no one knows the day or the hour.
Right.
So we don't really know exactly how this is going to play out. But what we do know is the evidence. What is the evidence out there that we can follow? So what we are seeing is an increase in UFOs. We have the testimony at the Large Binary Telescope that says that we are watching what is approaching. You have Malachi Martin saying, and you skipped this part, Malachi Martin said that something very important will portend in the next 5 years, 10 years. That's what he said. So I don't know exactly when what they are watching will be here, but Joe, I can tell you it's on its way. But when you see God move in a project like this, it is mind-blowing. One of the things that we did when it was all written and it was all put together before it was actually finished being edited and produced, we stood back and we went, I can't believe this. Because one of the things that the movie does is it shows how literal the Word of God is.
Right.
When the Word says that the whole world lies in the hands of the evil one, we accept that on a spiritual level, but we don't really accept that on a physical level. One of the things that this film does is it absolutely physically points to a physical being living here in control of planet Earth. And that is what The Lies of Men and Gods is all about.
Yeah, and I watched the film too. And I mean, there's some great stuff in there by Tom Horn. But besides that, though, no, honestly, people are going to see things. I'm telling you, you're going to see things that you have never seen before. Right. And they're so mind-boggling.
The Lies of Men and God. I'll have to remember that.
And yet, you guys went through the process of dating and all the things that you did. And it was an archaeological team that you hired that went there.
Okay.
Gotta go. Yeah, shake it up. Oh yeah, gotta go. Shake it up. Yes you can. Get the bad shake. Gotta go. Shake it up.
Whatever change you're making, whether it's the home, office, or baby's first room, if it's worth doing, it's worth Dulux.
If you're a fan of the literary arts, you might have heard about the Epic of Gilgamesh. Known as the oldest story ever written by man, this epic tells the story of an ancient king who waged war with none other than death itself. Gilgamesh's story has been passed down through the millennia, and interestingly, it appears that every religion or culture has its interpretation of it. However, it's always been thought that the epic was nothing more than a myth made up for people's amusement. There's a popular saying that art imitates life, and while many always thought the tale of Gilgamesh wasn't true, a recent archaeological discoveries disputed that fact. It would appear that what
Richard,
we
welcome
long
to the
believed
channel.
about this god-man might not have been so false after all. So look, I know there have been a lot of discoveries made recently that show our world isn't necessarily what it is. However, this one could easily blow the rest out of the water. It's the type of discovery that will make you hold your head and wonder why no one else is talking about it. But we've got all the details you need to know right here. So join us on this incredible journey to the middle of the desert, where we uncover one of the most mind-boggling discoveries ever made in recent times. The year was 2003, the location, the Iraqi desert. Just about a month before the war that decimated the Middle Eastern country, a team of archaeologists and researchers led by Jörg Fassbinder, the Ludwig Maximilians University of Munich, made a startling discovery. Deep in the Iraqi desert, Fassbinder and his team discovered a huge network of tombs, which they claimed were essentially inhabited by giant human-like beings. They eventually searched even deeper and found the bodies of other giants that had been dead and buried, supposedly for several millennia, as well as items and artifacts that had belonged to them. Besides all of this, the team reportedly discovered an entire landmass and settlement that had been buried for generations. According to Fassbinder, they found over 10,000 hectares of property and land, many of which appeared to have been described in the Epic of Gilgamesh itself.
Jörg Fassbinder of the Bavarian Department of Historical Monuments in Munich told the BBC's World Services Science and Action Program, quote, "I don't want to say definitively that it was the grave of King Gilgamesh, but it looks very similar to that described in the epic. We found just outside the city, an area in the middle of the former Euphrates River, the remains of such a building which could be interpreted as a burial," Mr. Fassbinder said. In the book, Gilgamesh is described as having been buried under the Euphrates.
He also added that they uncovered different Babylonian houses and properties that had been scattered around the area, all of which were buried underground for thousands of years. And now, a few years on, thanks to different whistleblower reports and emails released from top government officials, the truth has finally started to come out. Many believe that the tomb that was actually found was one belonging to Gilgamesh, the ancient king of Uruk. At this point, you probably have a few questions. Why is this discovery important, and what exactly is being hidden from us? Plus, who the heck is Gilgamesh? To understand the impact of this entire story, it's important to go back to the Epic of Gilgamesh itself. Known as one of the first, if not the first, stories ever told, the epic describes the story of the giant godlike king called Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh reportedly lived around 2500 BCE. He was reportedly the son of a Sumerian king and a Mesopotamian goddess. And thanks to his parents' genetic makeup, he was quite literally a god among men. Gilgamesh was said to have been about 17 feet tall.
Wow!
Enough strength to fight a lion and come out without a single scratch on his body. As part of the evidence of his existence, Gilgamesh was actually credited with having built the Great Walls of Uruk, the region which became Iraq today. Considering that the walls themselves are mentioned in the epic, I think it's safe to say there's some fact that Gilgamesh might truly have been a real person. Now, it is worth noting that the Epic of Gilgamesh itself wasn't written while he was alive. It was compiled from various historical records of the king, so it could have been a bit inaccurate. Nevertheless, as the epic goes, Gilgamesh was a despotic king who ruled his people with an iron fist. I mean, for a guy that was 17 feet tall, who knows, maybe his fists were literally made of iron. In any case, Gilgamesh wasn't necessarily loved by his people, and given that he was stronger than anyone else in the land, he could pretty much do whatever he wanted without giving a toss about them. Eventually, Anu, the king of the gods, came along and listened to the prayers of Gilgamesh's people to send them a liberator. So he used raw clay and his own spit to create Enkidu, a wild man who dwelled with the animals and seemingly came out of nowhere with a burning desire to beat the brakes off Gilgamesh. Enkidu eventually made his way to Uruk and challenged Gilgamesh to a duel. Both men had an epic fight that lasted for days on end, with nothing less than the fate of the kingdom literally on the line. Eventually, Gilgamesh came out on top in this fight, but for some reason, he chose not to kill Enkidu. I guess he was so impressed that someone could actually take him on for days. On the flip side, Enkidu also became a loyal friend and companion to the king. So just two buds with godlike powers roaming around the world with nothing and no one that could hold them back. What could go wrong, am I right? Well, a lot did go wrong.
They turned
Gilgamesh
on
and
each
Enkidu
other.
got into a lot of trouble, setting out at one point to the Cedar Forest beyond the 7th mountain range. Their goal was to claim the mountain range for Gilgamesh and increase his influence. While there, the two met Humbabar, a monster with the face of a lion that protected it.
It's amazing what a little snooze can do.
Imagine looking forward to your next energy bill. Get smart, get solar hard.
To the general wildlife there. Through some cunning and brute force, Gilgamesh and Enkidu murdered Humbabar, claiming his land. But while this caused a bit of an uproar among the inhabitants, our boys didn't care. Gilgamesh and Enkidu eventually went far enough when Ishtar, the Mesopotamian goddess of love and justice, reportedly tried to seduce Gilgamesh. The king rebuffed and scorned her, and she asked her parents, Anu and Antu, to give her the bull of heaven. Ishtar set the bull loose, charging it to kill her would-be lover. But once again, Gilgamesh and Enkidu proved to be just too much of a match. The two men tag-teamed on the bull, with Enkidu holding his tail and Gilgamesh stabbing it in the neck. Enkidu eventually tore off the bull's limbs and hurled it at Ishtar. This, according to the gods, was a step too far. They sentenced Enkidu to death, with the wild man falling severely ill and eventually dying. Gilgamesh was crushed by his best friend's death. He reportedly didn't even want to believe that Enkidu was dead until he saw maggots coming out of the latter's nose. Grief-stricken, Gilgamesh spared no expense in mourning and burying his friend. It wasn't just the fact that Enkidu had died that traumatized Gilgamesh. He had suddenly been faced with his own mortality, as well as the fact that he would also die one day. Determined to find the secret of eternal life, Gilgamesh left Uruk to seek out Utnapishtim, a man whose name literally translated to the far away. Utnapishtim had been the lone survivor of a terrible flood that a god had sent to his homeland of Babylon. According to the story, he had been tasked by the god in question to create a massive ship called the Preserver of Life that would help him survive the flood, and he did. Gilgamesh was convinced Utnapishtim would know how to avoid death and guide him. He had to cross some pretty crazy obstacles to get there, including the Twin Peaks at the end of the earth, a tunnel guarded by two giant scorpions, and even the waters of death. But reach Utnapishtim he did. When the two men met, Utnapishtim reprimanded Gilgamesh for all he had done, but he also explained how he was able to build the Preserver of Life. Utnapishtim explained that the god who told him to build the vessel gave him specific details and asked that he take two of every animal he could find. Sound like the story of Noah from the Bible, anyone? Essentially, Utnapishtim was granted eternal life by the gods for his actions, so he didn't have much to offer Gilgamesh. The king was unconvinced, however, so Utnapishtim told him that he could help him if he went a week without sleeping. But try as he did, Gilgamesh just couldn't conquer sleep, showing that he wasn't worthy. Nevertheless, Utnapishtim pitied him and told him of a magical plant that could renew his youth at the bottom of the waters of death. Gilgamesh bound stones to his feet and immediately jumped into the sea. He obtained the plant, but while he bathed, a serpent stole it, and with it, Gilgamesh's last hope for immortality. Devastated, Gilgamesh returned home. The king spent his last days as a relatively peaceful man, showing that the trip he took kind of changed him. He eventually died in Uruk, with his body being buried at the site allegedly discovered by Fassbinder and his team. So now we understand the Epic of Gilgamesh and who he was. While scholars continue to dispute whether or not he existed, the fact that Fassbinder and his team discovered this interesting site has raised a lot of eyebrows. Was it really the grave of Gilgamesh, or was it just some other grave site that might not necessarily be as historically relevant as Gilgamesh? For Fassbinder, the man who initially found this area, there was no doubt about the fact that this was the grave of Gilgamesh. Shortly after the grave was discovered, he spoke to the BBC, outlining everything that they had found and how significant it all was. Fassbinder also added that they had discovered what appeared to be the remains of a burial place just outside the city's walls as well. Nevertheless, other researchers and experts called the stories bluff. As far as they were concerned, there was something not right with Fassbinder's discovery and the links to the ancient Uruk king. For one, they pointed out that there was just no way that Gilgamesh existed, since there weren't as many historical references to him. Most of the references had been mythological alone, with no real background in science or recorded history. And what's more, naysayers pointed out, was that the bodies found weren't necessarily 17 feet tall, like the epic claims that Gilgamesh was. But if you recall, it's been established that the epic was actually written centuries after Gilgamesh himself died. So it is possible that there was a few exaggerations in the story, and that some things weren't necessarily as clear-cut as they seemed. Plus, come on guys, no one believes that things like the waters of death and others actually existed. So the epic might have been a bit imaginative and inaccurate, but it doesn't necessarily mean that a man with godlike strength, or perhaps even from a superior race like Gilgamesh, didn't exist. Ever since the discovery of Gilgamesh's grave was made public, many people from around the world have been asking whether this Sumerian king really did exist. And if he did exist, how do we know that there isn't an ancient civilization that lived much longer ago than we can remember or have records for? Well, interestingly, the answer to all of this might actually tie back to Christian theology. The Christian faith is rooted in the belief in God, the supreme being who created the entire world, who still controls its affairs. Christian stories are told from the Bible, which gives accounts of different events that happened in the world. One of the lesser-known tales in the Bible is that of the fallen angels. And no, I'm not talking about the Chris Brown song. In the book of Genesis, chapter 6, the Bible tells...
Should have used Yates weed and feed. A mow, a water. And if you'd used weed and feed too, you'd be barefoot and loving it.
Take the next step for a barefoot-ready lawn with Yates.
Tells of rapid expansion among the first humans in the world. It reads, "Now it came about when men began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves whomever they chose." The book essentially claims that angels from heaven came to the earth to have sexual relations with human women. The result of this sin was the birth of a race of humans called the Nephilim, people with superhuman strength and abilities who could pretty much do whatever they liked because they were stronger than everyone else. Now, if you recall from the epic, Gilgamesh was described as a superhuman who was also born of a god and a human. So could it be that he was a product of this same reproductive cycle? Another interesting biblical reference that ties to the epic of Gilgamesh is that of Noah and the flood. The book of Genesis also tells the tale of Noah, a man who was devout and very close to God, was pretty much the only holy man left in the land. Everyone around had just about forgotten about God, but Noah held fast to his faith. Eventually, God told Noah that he was going to destroy the world via a massive flood and start all over because everyone had become so sinful. He then directed Noah to build an ark, basically a ship, where he and his family would be safe. The ark would contain Noah, his wife, 3 sons and their wives, and just as well, the ark would contain 2 of every animal in the world, a male and a female. So once God was done wiping the world away, Noah and his family could begin repopulating the earth, and the animals could do the same for their races. And if you recall, the Epic of Gilgamesh talks about him going to see Utnapishtim, who had survived a huge storm by creating a ship. The storm had wiped out his entire kingdom, but he managed to survive because he listened to the instructions and made the boat. Nevertheless, the discovery was understandably a shocker. Thanks to recent technologies, researchers could now test the theories and see if Gilgamesh really did exist. So you might be asking, what on earth happened to this discovery and all of the bodies? Well, let's just say that the US government had other plans. If there's ever been any conflict that has raised as many eyebrows in the past few years, it's got to be the war in Iraq. The entire conflict has pretty much shaped global geopolitics as we know it today, and it's landed a lot of people and infamy. Unwrapping the Iraq War on its own will probably take another video. Some believe the war began because of an interest in oil, while others claim it was a direct response to the 9/11 attacks. But what is especially interesting is that the war in Iraq actually started about a month after Fassbinder and his team discovered the grave of Gilgamesh. According to sources, the war essentially made it impossible for Fassbinder and his team to get the items they discovered, so they couldn't carbon date them or make additional findings to help them understand what they were dealing with. Left.
This is Carol. She saved $380 when she switched her car insurance to Yui.
I'm on a fixed income. That's big for me.
Why not give Yui a try? Maybe you'll save like Carol did. Yui, you insured.
Hi, I'm Amy, and I'm part of the team down here at Boropez. So here at Boropez, we know you've got better.
With nothing they could do and need to save themselves, Fassbinder and his team left the area where they had made the groundbreaking discovery and fled the country. It's easy to think that this is nothing but a myth, but consider this: every single justifiable reason why the US invaded Iraq has been proven to be false. The official line was the country had helped to plan the 9/11 attacks. But George W. Bush, US president who started this entire thing, officially came out to say that they didn't.
What did Iraq have to do with what? The attack on the World Trade Center. Nothing, except for it's part of, and nobody's ever suggested in this administration that Saddam Hussein ordered the attack. Iraq was the lesson of September 11th is take threats before they fully materialize, Cam. Nobody's ever suggested.
For the others who think the invasion was to stop Iraq from developing nuclear weapons and instruments of mass destruction, well, guess what? Iraq wasn't.
The main reason we went into Iraq at the time was we thought he had weapons of mass destruction. Turns out he didn't, but he had the capacity to make weapons of mass.
The only possible reason was that perhaps the government wanted to gain control of Iraq's massive oil reserves. But is that really a good enough reason to start a war that decimated a region and left it perpetually in flux? What if there was some other reason for this? What if there was something the US government really wanted to achieve in Iraq? Well, leaked emails to Hillary Clinton, a woman who, in case you forgot, has spent most of her adult life in government and even ran for president twice, shows that the powers that be just might have had a reason to keep this discovery a secret.
Now you can see here, it says, this is from Dimitra Senegar. That's who it's from. This is to Hillary Clinton. Important for context. And then it says, well, you can read it there. And you see what it says?
Wow.
I mean, requesting documents pertaining to the resurrection chamber of Gilgamesh, the location of his body, and the location of...
Wow, not his grave, his resurrection tomb. So they knew he was going to be resurrected. Wow.
The buried Nephilim.
Want to know what's even weirder? Witnesses claimed that the military immediately set up an encampment around the grave of Gilgamesh as soon as they landed in Iraq. They reportedly sent reporters and locals out of the region and pretty much overran the entire area. Some witnesses also claim that the military began excavating items from the site, moving them to an undisclosed location. And besides all this, reports of the discovery of Gilgamesh's grave were pretty much wiped off the internet. It was basically like this thing never existed. To be fair, this might all seem a bit extreme, but there's definitely a lot of overlap. As for why the government might be interested in Gilgamesh and his grave, there's also a bit of a theory. Corey Good, an independent investigator and YouTuber, claimed that the government and other members of the global elite might be looking to carry out DNA tests on Gilgamesh's corpse, as well as the other corpses found in the tomb. In an episode of Cosmic Disclosure that has now been deleted, Good claimed that there are several stasis chambers around the world where these giants are pretty much kept. No one knows if governments around the world are using these chambers as a way of preserving the bodies for the purpose of conducting these tests, but it sure won't be out of the ordinary to find that out. Now, you might think that the discovery of Gilgamesh and his grave might be the only weird thing to come out of Iraq, but you'd be wrong. This region could contain secrets about the origins of mankind as well as how we came to be. In March 1853, a group of men led by French scientist Paul-Émile Botta discovered an interesting find while digging for treasures in Khorsabad, Iraq. They found the remains of what appeared to be a massive Assyrian palace, and with it, a trove of Sumerian cuneiform inscriptions. When translated, the inscriptions showed what archaeologists believed to be the oldest civilization in the world, a group of superhuman beings known as the Anunnaki.
Hang on, guys. Oh, shit, it's the wrong way. Hang on, guys. One for Israel. Okay, hang on. Okay, I'll finish with a couple of Jews' testimonies and then I'll hang up, guys.
ילדה קטנה בגן בנימין בחיפה.
Oh no, she's doing that in Hebrew. So that's not watchable.
בן אדם מאוד מאוד קרוב אליי חלה במחלה סופנית.
Oh, they're talking in Hebrew.
But I was curious. Deep inside, I was curious. I never read it. And so many people tell you, I don't read, I don't know, I don't believe it. They just never read it. You got to open a book and read it before you say, I don't like it or I don't believe it. What's inside? After what happened to her father, my mother had to immediately be taken to the south of France to hide on the farm until the end of the war. She did that, and then she came back to Paris, where she lived. But she realized, she was about 17 when she came back, and she realized that for her, at least for her, God had died in the Holocaust. Her faith in anything was gone. She had good reason. She basically was 15 when the Gestapo came to the house where she still lives in Paris and snatched her father from in front of her eyes and took him away. And then she didn't find out until much later that he died in Auschwitz. And that's why he never came back. In 1981, I came on my own. I came to California, and I was kind of excited because, you know, for a Frenchman, California, I was like, wow, you know, palm trees, the beach. And of course, I was thinking, you know, Californian girls. We always talk about Californian girls. Well, sure enough, on that trip, towards the end of my trip, I met this girl, Californian girl, and I fell in love with her. Beautiful girl. And it was only 10 days, but I fell in love with her. I have to say, I was quite excited to introduce my French friends to this California girlfriend of mine. That was pretty cool for a Frenchman, to have a California girlfriend. We spent some time together, and eventually one day I told her, I said, listen, I really think I want to marry you. And that's when she said, well, wait a minute. We can't do that. I'm a Christian, and you're Jewish. We don't believe in the same thing. And I said, I don't care. You can believe in whatever you want. Let me believe in whatever I want. You love me. I love you. Let's just move on and stay together and get married. She wouldn't do that. At some point in my late teens, my sister had married this religious Jewish man. And after becoming friendly, he asked me if I wanted to go with him and study the Torah and the Talmud and consider my Jewish roots a little deeper. And I was attracted to that for a little while. I was because there was something, when you have Jewish blood, when you hear Yiddish, when you hear something Jewish, it always kind of touches you in a certain way. So I was attracted to that. But then, having grown up in a very Jewish environment with Jewish family everywhere, I remember that what really bothered me is, in a lot of cases, was some of the hypocrisy I saw in the Jewish community. And I kept thinking of the time that we would go to synagogue for Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, just to please the patriarch of the family. And so we'd be there, we'd give him a kiss and say, hey, we're here, you know, Hag Sameach. And then we'd go outside and smoke cigarettes and look at the new cars that we bought, the new clothes. And I realized this is not real. This is not about religion. This is not about God. The Bible is just God's book, a big book. It meant nothing to me. This is just about pretending. And I thought, if I'm ever going to believe in God for anything, it's got to be real. Whoever he is, it's got to be real. It can't be hypocrisy. So I said no. I got this book from Ellen, the late great Planet Earth, and it was a book on prophecies, and it was divided in two parts. The first, the prophecies of the Messiah when he came, and the prophecies of the Messiah when he's going to come back. And it was a little overwhelming for me, but they were very short. So I started reading. This is what was prophesied in the Jewish Bible, and this is what happened. And I'm going like, wow, if this is really true, this is kind of cool. And I would read this book on my way to work every day in Paris, in the subway. And I think 2 or 3 times I actually missed my stop when I stop and I'm going like, oh my goodness, I have to get out and go on the other train and go back to my work and be late. It's at that time things started to change. It really became more of a reality. And what was interesting to me, when I read the Bible, God's word, it did nothing. But when a man in the book that you wrote gave me the same information, it was like relating a man to another man. I'm going, this guy believes that. I'm not alone. Maybe he's right. When I think of Jesus, when I thought of Jesus back then, to me, Jesus was a dead man on a cross. The statue you see in the Catholic Church. How many times have I been into a Catholic church? Maybe a dozen times for special events for my friends. But there was no connection. I knew because in the family it was being told, Jesus is not for us. But because my entire family was non-religious, there was never any discussion of why he was not for us. I was just told early on, Jesus is not for the Jews. The first time I really understood who Jesus was, I realized that here was somebody who was completely innocent of anything, who paid the price for everything I've ever done. And that was hard for me to accept. He basically died for me. He said, you know what? I'll take care of it. You're innocent now. Whatever you did, it's gone. That was big. And to be honest with you, every morning when I get up, I'm going like, I can't believe he did that because I really don't deserve it. There was an increasing burden to both reach my people and study God's word. And I was really interested in finding out what God had to say. So eventually this led to me deciding to go to study to get a degree at a Bible college in Jewish studies, to get a degree in Jewish studies. And I remember calling my dad after, it was probably like 10 years when I told him my involvement in the believing community. And every time I called him, there was a little more and a little more and a little more. Eventually I called him and said, Dad, I'm going to go to a Bible college and get a Bible degree in Jewish studies. And my dad's reaction, he was not a believer, said, what's happened to you? Next time you call me, you're going to be the Pope.
Okay, guys, God bless. Good night.